Pirates I Can Reject Everything 121-140. 121. Bartolomeo and Desire officially debut. Speaking of the expo, I am also very excited. Carmen shook his head, with a look of intimidation on his beautiful and charming face, and said with a slight smile, if it wasn't for Carrie's secrets, I wouldn't even know there would be such a gathering. I didn't expect that the pirates would still be there. It's incredible to hold such a grand ceremony. All pirates want to stand out and become the focus of the celebration, so the battle is unavoidable, and there must be a lot of hidden treasures inside. Alip carried the big iron rod, smiled, and said casually, it's interesting in a place like this. Chris is so strong, and when that time comes, he will definitely overwhelm the crowd, and it will shock the entire expo, such as this. The picture, it's interesting to think about it. Say, the World Expo will start in 1967. By that time, we have already become Chihuahua. Only in this capacity as the expo, it seems. Can't even tell. Baccarat folded her crimson hair and said with a smile, let's forget about this, Chris will make his own decision. At this time, the passers-by on the side of the business board saw that Chris and others appeared, and they couldn't help but whispered about who these people were, and why there were so many beautiful women in there. Whoa whoa whoa, the woman carrying the big iron rod, her skin looks so white, she is really fascinating. No, that beauty with curly eyebrows is called beautiful. This figure, stains, if I have such a woman, that night can't be. You don't want to die, you dare to discuss them. The one in black, but the black one that has been making a lot of trouble lately, Chris. What? That person is Chris, who has always rewarded 100 million Baileys. He is still stunned. What are you afraid of? There is a navy stationed in the town, and the strength of the colonel is so powerful. Is it necessary to be afraid? Listening to the whispers of passers-by, they pointed to the right. Bassos, the most straightforward character, couldn't help but complain. He shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, there are too many beauties on the boat, and walking on the road always attracts the attention of many people, which is very boring. Otherwise, you can tell the captain that if you can abandon these women and forget about the poison. Hugh rides on Stallone, smiling mysteriously, and said with a mysterious smile, anyway, these women don't have much use, just drive them away. Ajin glanced at him coldly, and said with a cold expression, don't talk nonsense, send Q. Don't you know how big the role of Baccarat is? If they were all driven away, who brought us Lafitte and turned the cane, as always, polite and gentlemanly. Baccarat is important, but so are the others. The captain is the strongest man in the world. If there are no beautiful women around him, it would be unreasonable. Beside the strong, there must be some beauties who can help. This is inevitable. Chloe habitually pushed his glasses with the palm of his hand and said rationally, that's the truth. It's true that beautiful women love heroes since ancient times, and the strong have their own attraction. The halo of people, surrounded by beauty, yin-yang-yang, this is an unavoidable situation. I feel that there are only a dozen or so now, and the number of people is not large enough. If the number of people reaches a few dozen one day, then it will be relatively normal. Fan Yifenka tapped a gun on the shoulder, still so indifferent, nodded, and continued. This is Luo looking at the tall building in front of him, carrying a demon knife and crying, and said coldly, that is the execution of Roger, the Pirate King. Taiwan, famous place in Rogue Town. Execution stand, above the square. At this time, a lot of people gathered here. Some were chatting, some were watching the execution platform on the east side of the square. Some street gangsters were basking in the sun there, chatting and talking to the boss. A group of people walked towards the square. A little boy, looking at Bartolomeo, he said quickly, this group of people seems to be all pirates, and those girls are so beautiful. She's in great shape, and her skin is white. Boss, are you interested? Do we want to go over there to see? Ha ha ha. Other little fellows, when they heard this, they were very excited, and they hurriedly followed and yelled, boss, let's go over together. My favorite, look at the beauties. Oh gaga, I haven't seen any beauties in the town recently. My eyes are a little thirsty. Hey. Let's go, let these Hazang see the power of the Bardo Club, we are the only ones the strongest. At first glance, it looks like a newcomer Hazang, who dares to land in Rog Town, and will definitely be caught by the Navy. Speaking of the Navy, I hate that Sig the most, because he makes our life difficult. Desaya stroked her red and yellow hair, saving these little fellows. Meizui glared fiercely, and she knew how to look at beauties without being angry. Am I not a beauty? You guys, all have no eyes. How dare you ignore my beauty, I owe it to Ming. Bartolomeo stroked his green hair, laughed and said, Desaya, what you said is so funny, ha 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 ha, you are the most beautiful woman in the Bardo Club, who doesn't like this? I know the little ones, what do you say? The little fellows nodded quickly and responded with a smile, yes, yes, Miss Desaya is the most beautiful. Hadzaya glared at Bartolomeo, with a look of dissatisfaction on her delicate and sworn face. The color of the color, said, you are enough, and then make fun of me. Be careful, I tell Grandma, let her old man give you a good education, and see if you dare to show it. Desaya put his arms around him, squinted at Bartolomeo, and said with a sneer, a few days ago, I saw you being trained by your grandma to bow your head. Zizai, that look is really funny, hee. Bartolomeo waved his hand quickly, with a helpless eyelids, he smiled bitterly, and said a big shit, can you stop talking about this matter, it's very unpleasant, let's talk about your face. You still make mistakes a lot. Grandma has taught you a lot more times than me, so it's clear that we are half a pound. Don't talk to me about this. Bartolomeo leaned against his chair and leaned over Erlang's legs, with a look of admiration, said, Grandma, she is an old man, she is so powerful, she seems to know everything. Growing up, I have never seen such a powerful old man, and I really admire her so much. My intuition tells me that when she was young, she must have been a very good woman. I believe this very much. Mysterious, Grandma is really too mysterious, I really want to know her past. Bartolomeo slapped his head, touched his nose ring, and said with emotion, unfortunately, Grandma, she never reveals the past, it's really too much. Sorry. Desaya sat on the stone bench, crossed Erlang's legs, shrugged his shoulders. 5.6 followed up. I asked about this too, but Grandma never said it. She knows so much. When she was young, she must have been to a lot of places. There is no need to say this. I think, the wisest person in the whole town is Grandma, but she is too mysterious, so the people who know her are not many. Desaya who turn their heads to these little fellows and say in a stern tone, since Grandma doesn't want people to know, if you're all right, don't mention Grandma's name outside, so as not to cause trouble for her old man. Knowing that there are no lads, I nodded and responded respectfully, don't worry, Desa miss ya, we won't talk nonsense. 122. At the execution platform, recruit new people into the Great Channel. This is Roger's execution stand. It's very high from the right. Karina stepped into the plaza, and Maymue glanced at the situation in the plaza. People came and went, and many people gathered here. Nami raised her head, concealed the execution stand on the square with her big eyes, and said something with a proud look on her beautiful white face. This is the pride of our people in the East China Sea. Everyone knows the name of Roger, the king of sea stables. He is really too powerful. A man who can do this, even if he dies, is a hero. Nuauchi nodded. A smile appeared on Chao's face, and she said in agreement, Roger's name is indeed too loud. From childhood to adulthood, I have always heard legends about him, and his name is famous throughout the East China Sea. Meidi looked at the two sisters, raised her eyebrows, smiled and said, we Donghai people really know about Roger's existence. To say that the most famous pirate in the East China Sea must be him, everyone agrees. Carmen shrugged Lingxiang's shoulders, looked casual, and said lightly, One Piece Roger, he has left and will be forgotten by the world. Chris is different, he is so young and powerful. In the future, his name will be louder than Roger. I have always believed in this. Queen Sweetheart stroked her pale blonde hair and smiled sweetly, that's right, Chris's goal, but the achievement that is more recent than Roger's, is definitely not Roger the Pirate King. Betty, who can be compared to 997, took a breath. As always, he said calmly, seriously, we don't have much to say about Roger One Piece. Not everyone can evaluate a big man of that level. His merits and demerits are still left to history to write what Chris said. I think he said it well, so let's not make too many remarks. Alrita was carrying a big iron rod, and May looked at Chris' figure, with an elegant and dignified smile on her delicate eyelids. Anyway, following Chris, I am very at ease, and I will not envy others. Moreover, I believe that Chris's future achievements will definitely be huge. It is not something that ordinary people can compare with. Let's wait and see. Ju looked at her, touched her white chin, nodded lightly, and said generously, I agree with what you said. I'm also very curious about that person's future. I really want to know where he will go. At this time, Poison Q was lying on Stallone and said with a weird smile, since this is the execution platform of Roger, the king of sea annihilation, why don't we how to destroy it? Bashes raised his arms and laughed loudly, if you dare to do this, the Navy will definitely not spare us, way ha ha ha. Hearing such a loud voice from Bassos, all the people on the square came over to the right and started talking in a low voice. Who are these people? I don't know why they all look fierce. These women are really beautiful. Zizhui, the one with the big iron rod on his back, his skin is as white as snow, this is the rhythm that is going to fascinate people. Come on, I remembered, they're Chris Hay. The one in black is Chris in black with a bounty of 100 million Bailey. What, he is Chris, then hurry up. What are you afraid of? There is a navy stationed in Rog Town, they dare to mess around here, don't you die. At this time, on a wooden chair at the periphery of the square, there are two people, one big and one small, a father and daughter. Duddy One Masterson is a sniper, and his eyesight is very powerful. When he saw Chris and others at a glance, he couldn't help frowning and said something. We'll meet them here. His daughter Lurgia, leaning on the chair and eating ice cream, looked puzzled, and asked her father in a childish voice, what's the matter with you? Duddy Masterson touched his daughter's little head, smiled amiably and said, it's okay, I just found some pirates. So are we going to catch pirates again, father? Leilgia blinked her eyes, she looked like a curious baby, very cute, Duddy. Masterson shook his head gently, avoiding the direction of Chris and the others, and said with a smile, we are dealing with little pirates. The bounty is very low. This time, the bounty is very high. It is not what we want to catch. Anyway, if they don't provoke us, then I will not see it. Lurgia was eating ice cream, nodded heavily, and said with a smile, I know, my father is the best man in the world. Well, no, he's the best father in the world. Duddy Masterson laughs and touches. Small head, with a doting look on his face, very. This daughter is everything to him. For her, Duddy Masterson gave up the rank of second lieutenant in the Navy headquarters and became a bounty hunter, or his sniper ability is more than enough to be a colonel. The east side of the square, BCDG, Bartolomeo and others had already seen Chris and the others at this time, and they hurriedly discussed each and every one of them. Lying. These women are all very dazzling, they are so beautiful. The one with the big iron stick, this skin, is pretending to be dead. More than a dozen beauties, what kind of thief group is this? The captain is too happy, grass. The ghost knows, but I am afraid that they are very strong. Let's not go up, the voice of that guy just now is so loud, and he is big, the fight must be very powerful and scared to death. Seeing Chris and the others, Desire couldn't calm down anymore, so he stood up quickly, his pretty eyelids covered with shock, and he quickly said something. It was them. Bartolomeo also stood up and said in horror, isn't this the Chris pirates? How did they come to Rogue Town? This is a big pirate with a reward of 100 million Baileys. I have never heard of it. If you have such a high bounty, you will give me bad ideas. If such a big pirate goes up, we will not be punished. Kill Ming. Bartolomeo pointed to these little fellows, and scolded angrily, Next time you highlight the bright spots. Don't know anything, just run over and say this and that. You will kill people if you do this. Grass. Hearing such a terrifying Zhongguanjin, these little fellows were startled one by one. Desire waved his hand, sat down again, and persuaded, okay, they didn't mean it anymore, don't get angry. But Chris C. Stables, what are they doing in town? Are they about to enter the Great Channel? Desire leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, put his arms around him, and said to himself, since there are smokers in the town, since they entered, I'm afraid they won't be able to get out. The Navy will definitely come over later. A battle is inevitable. Bartolomeo patted his chair, laughed loudly, his eyes were fierce, and said something like that is the best. Fight, fight, all. Killing is best. Just let me see how strong the pirates with a bounty of 100 million are. Ha ha ha. Bartolomeo looked at the people below, waved his hand, and said loudly, you are timid, hurry up and leave here next. The battle will definitely be very fierce, and those who are afraid hurriedly go home. At this time, Chris and others have come to the bottom of the execution platform. I saw this execution platform, very high, with a quaint meaning on it. You can tell at a glance that it has existed for many years and then it will start recruiting new people. King looked at Chris, and said with a slight smile, Captain, do you want me to push the glasses on Lacrosse habitually with a twitching heart, and calmly and rationally said, since we want to recruit new people, it's better for the captain to go out. In this way, he appeared more authoritative and more sincere. He coughed and smiled strangely, we are going to enter the Great Channel, if the newcomer is too weak, then let me directly poison it. Bashes laughed loudly and said loudly, indeed, it's the last place, if the people on board are too weak, it's better to just give up. After all, there is a big battle waiting for us next. Way ha ha ha. Chris ignored their conversation, disappeared in place with a bang, and appeared on the top of the execution platform. 123. Colonel Smoker is here, now the Chris pirates are over. When this young man in fruit clothes suddenly appeared above the execution platform, everyone in the square was shocked by how fast. They didn't see the trajectory of Chris' movement at all, and it was too incredible that people just disappeared and then appeared there. Did you see it just now? What's going on? 2 inches. I don't know about Indigo, I kept staring at him just now, he suddenly disappeared, and flew to the high platform. This is the sea stable with a reward of 100 million Bailey. It is too strong and too strong. Tell me, what is he going to do? The ghost knows, I just stared at the beautiful woman. Zizhui, these women in the Chris Highway group, all of them need to have a good appearance. A figure and a figure, I'm almost drunk. That woman with curly eyebrows has a really good figure and a graceful temperament. I like her so much, who knows her name, please tell me. Mad, this bastard Chris, with so many beauties, I am envious of me, sloppy. Duddy, Mastarson was also shocked. His eyesight is not comparable to that of ordinary people, but even he can't have clear traces of Chris' movement. This really shocked him. It's the first time I've seen such a speed. D12 Mastarson frowned, his face full of doubts, and said to himself, it seems to have disappeared out of thin air, there is no sign of jumping at all. At his speed, my marksmanship would not be able to hit him at all. If I fight him, I will definitely die. Lurgia is still eating ice cream, leaning on the chair, blinking her eyes and asking curiously, Father, where are you? Say what? Who do you want to fight? Did we meet the little pirate Duddy again? Mastarson touched his daughter's little head and said with a gentle smile, it's okay, let's just sit here and not provoke them. In fact, we don't need to take action at all. After waiting for the Navy here, the old smoker who will definitely be dispatched is very strong, and a fierce battle is unavoidable. In the same way, in the east, Bartolomeo and the others were also shocked by Chris' speed, and their faces showed horror, as if they had seen a ghost. These little fellows, their eyes are about to fall, they are so frightened that Desia's beautiful eyes are unblinking, with a face full of surprise, and murmured, this, not just now, how did he disappear and why didn't I see it? The man disappeared immediately, and then appeared on the execution platform. How did he get up there? Incredible, so unbelievable. Bartolomeo nodded again and again, with a look of horror on his face, and said a word. Terrible, really terrifying. The big pirate with a reward of 100 million is really extraordinary. It is not something we can defeat at all. If he wants to kill us, at this speed, we don't know how we died. The first time I visited such a terrifying person, I was scared to death. At this moment, a voice came from above the execution platform. Everyone in Rogue Town. Chris put his arms around him, looked down at the people below, and said loudly, I'm Chris, the captain of the Chris Pirates. Next, I will go to the Great Front Road, heading towards this dangerous sea area. Now, I'm sending out a grand invitation, whoever wants to go out can watch us go together. After all, the sea is the place where men should go. At this time, the sun shines on Chris's body, dyeing him pale gold. It looks so sacred as if the gods are descending, which is very confusing. Quiet. The square suddenly fell into silence, and everyone was stunned. They did not expect that the Chris Pirates would openly call their subordinates here and completely ignore the Navy here. The captain said it too well, the sea is where men should go. Way ha ha ha. Bashes raised his arms high, looked up at Chris' figure, smiled and shouted loudly. Poison Q coughed and said, why don't you say you want to become Chiwahai? Isn't that more shocking? Ajin glanced at him coldly, and said without net, what do you do with so much talk? Not everyone can come up here in our boat. Have an idea, dare to take risks, and must have enough strength, otherwise what would you do on the boat? Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly, and said politely, since the captain has sent an invitation, there must be some good ones here. Newcomer. Otherwise, our captain will definitely not open this mouth. This is inevitable. Suddenly, there is a roar not far away, and it spreads all over the square. The damn Chris Pirates, dare to open it on Lao Su's site. Recruit subordinates. You are provoking my majesty. It's good to not take me seriously. Since you are here, don't think about entering the Great Waterway, but going into the advanced city. Go to repentance. With a cigarette in his mouth and Halushi with 10 hands on his back, Shuj strode into the square with the famous knife Shiu in his arms, followed behind, trotted and said, Lord Colonel, please wait for me. There are too many people in this group, you must be careful, you can't be careless, and there is a roar. Damn, you wait for this young master. When this young master is out of trouble, he will not spare you. Cavendish is handcuffed with both hands and feet, and there are many ropes tied to him, turning him into a white it's like a dumpling, can't move at all. At this time, he found the young man on the execution platform, and became more and more angry, roaring. Chris, young Master Ben has been waiting for you for a long time. You dare to steal young Master Ben's limelight. Young Master Ben will never let you go. You wait for young Master Ben. A young Navy, very dissatisfied with Cavendish, slapped him hard on the head, reprimanded and shouted, if you shout again, your mouth will be blocked. See how you shout card. Although Wendish was very angry, he didn't lose his mind. He suddenly fell silent and encountered these Navy. If he dared to continue beeping, he would not slap his head, but slap him directly. If he was in front of so many people, being beaten hard, Cavendish, who has always paid attention to face, was afraid that he would not survive, so he simply committed suicide. Seeing the appearance of Shog, the people on the square were so frightened that they hurried to the distance to hide from 783. Hurry up, don't stay here, run farther away. Wonderful, the battle will break out later. I'm looking forward to it, ha ha ha. Smog is a cold guy, and these pirates will definitely be finished later. When these pirates are caught, let's sneak past and see if we can grab a beauty. It really doesn't work, just buy one for the money, ho ho ga. May I? If I can bribe the Navy, I will buy the one with the curly eyebrows. I really like her so much, I like it very much. Outside the square, Duddy Mastassin looked at Smog's figure, showed a faint smile, and said that the speed of the Navy was much faster than I thought. This time, the Chris pirates will be wiped out. By Juan, the smoky fruit succumbs to the natural system. It is not Chris high stables at all. It can deal with the ice cream on Lerge's little hand. She has not finished eating. She is wearing Smog and others, curiously asked, Father, how come the Navy? Could it be that they are also here to catch pirates? So can we still catch Daddy Mastarson with an amiable smile, and said gently, it's okay girl, we can just watch it here, it has nothing to do with us. My father is right. Lergia leaned on the chair, shook her little feet, her little eyelids were covered with jokers, and her voice was tender and sweet, very nice. 124. Smoker, if you dare to do it, I will kill you. On the east side of the square, there were also discussions. The ghost of Si Yuanj is here, now they are finished. Mule, hey, it's a pity that these beautiful beauties have been arrested one by one. Grass boss, can you manage to get a woman out? I like the one who carries the big iron rod, the boss of the quack. I'm not picky, just give me one, hee hee. Fuck off, the Navy I fear most is Shoger. Let Lao Su ask him for someone, do you want to kill me? Grass mud horse. Desire looked at Smog's figure, wrinkled his beautiful eyebrows, and on his beautiful white face, a dignified Smog had never been defeated. Powerful. And although Chris offered a reward of 100 million, he was the pirate with the highest reward in the world. But it is certainly not that Smoker's opponent will be defeated. This fight is definitely going to be exciting, I'm really looking forward to it. Below the execution platform, there is another scene. Bashes raised his arms high, looked at the Navy who suddenly appeared, laughed and said, come on, we finally meet the Navy, way ha 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 ha. Poison Q lay on Stallone with a weird smile, it's the first time I've been at sea for so long, and I've met the Navy and will directly poison them all to death, our bounty will definitely skyrocket. Luo Agent glanced at him slantingly. Said indifferently, the Navy is our partner, how can we kill them? Luo holding the demon knife and crying, looking at Si Yuanj, as always cold, said that the strength of the Navy is very strong, very difficult to deal with. Hawkins nodded, played with the cards, and said in a low voice, being able to guard the entrance of the Great Waterway must be very strong, there is no doubt about this. Fan Oka tapped his shoulder with a gun, still so serious and expressionless, no matter how strong he is, his fate is already doomed. Crow looked at Balefit and asked calmly and rationally, has the captain said, can't we kill the Navy? Nothing. Lafitte turned his cane, politely, although the captain did not explain, but for future plans, try not to conflict with the Navy. Of course, we, the Chris pirates, have never been afraid of anyone. There is absolutely no doubt about this. At this moment, Meaty looked at the girls, stroked her pale blonde hair, and her delicate face burst into a gentle expression. Smile and explain in detail. You may not know that his name is Smog. He is a colonel of the Navy headquarters. He is a natural smoke fruit person. He is very powerful. He is not one of the strongest navies in the entire East China Sea. As far as I know, since he was detained, none of the pirates in Kodo seemed to be able to leave, and they were all caught. Carmen nodded lightly, smiled and said, this Smog is really famous in the East China Sea, and I've heard his name too. Karina shrugged her shoulders and rolled her beautiful eyes BCDB, with a sly look. She said with a smile, it seems that his record is about to be broken. Because so many of us come in, none of us will stay. Not only that, but he will also take some more newcomers to leave Nami to look at Smog and others, and say with a smile, it seems that the Navy attaches great importance to us, so we sent so many people. Sweetheart Queen to brush her pale golden hair, to Betty, after thinking about it, this is indeed the first time we have encountered the Navy. Betty didn't speak, spit out the smoke in her mouth, nodded and responded. At this moment, above the execution platform, there was a faint voice, you came just right, I want to tell you something. Chris put his arms around him, peeking at Smoker on the ground, and said calmly, I will go to the Great Channel after recruiting new recruits. Then he arrived at the Kingdom of Alabasta and killed Crocodile who was hiding in it. In this way, I can replace him and become the next Shichibukai. Since we are in a cooperative relationship in the future, I advise you not to do it, otherwise I will probably kill you directly. The whole square fell into silence. Everyone was so shocked by Chris's declaration that they wanted to kill Crocodile and become Shichibukai. This is too incredible. And to talk to Smog like this is the rhythm of courting death. This young man is really round enough. Duddy Masterson looked at Chris, frowned and said, he, a rookie who hasn't entered the Great Waterway, has delusionally become Shichibukai. Such an arrogant guy is destined to lose here, there is no other possibility. Lyurgia had finished eating the ice cream, the minister blinked his eyes, and asked pretty lively, Father, what is Chiwahai? Duddy Masterson touched her pouch and explained gently that Chiwahai is a real big pirate, each of which is very powerful, shocking the whole sea. Moreover, Chiwahai is a pirate recognized by the Navy, they are legal and we are all small characters, and they have nothing to do with Chiwahai, so let's not understand this girl. Lyurgia nodded and sang with a smile, okay, listen to them all. Fathers tilde. In the east, Bartolomeo and the others talked about it one by one. It's so cool, so handsome. Boss, if they kill the Navy, let's join this Chris Hayward group. That's right, men should go to the sea and rush to the Great Waterway. Not to mention, if you join them, you can at least see beautiful women every day. Haha Hadzia glared at them and said angrily, everyone is just this kind of virtue. Besides beautiful women, what else would you do? It's really not promising at all, can you stop being so embarrassing? Immediately afterwards, he frowned his long and slender Louis eyebrows, with a serious look on his pretty face, and muttered, but if they can defeat the Navy, they can really think about it. The sea is so wide, if you can't go to the Great Waterway in your lifetime, it will be a pity to turn your head to look at this green-haired partner, and ask curiously, Bartolome, how is it, do you want to follow them? Woolen cloth. Bartolomeo touched his nose ring, with a very ugly smile, and said directly, join them, of course. But the premise is that they can escape the pursuit of the Navy, otherwise, let's wait and see if he has such strength. A captain is domineering. When a pirate is a pirate, he threatens the Navy. Way ha 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 ha. Duque coughed and said weakly, if it's not domineering enough, then you can change to a captain. Hearing this, Akin was suddenly dissatisfied, gave him a cold look, and said in a deep voice, this is Chris High, the captain of the thief must be Chris, this is not to be said. Crow pushed his glasses habitually, frowned slightly, and said with some doubts, I didn't expect the captain to reveal the next plan, but it's a little bit beyond my expectation, such a secret thing, I personally think, it's better not to say it. Lafayette put his hand in front of him, smiled slightly, and explained that you were right. If it is normal, it should not be said. However, our captain is too powerful. Strength, confidence. Even if it is said, it is unlikely to affect the progress of the plan. Because, no one can stop the captain's footsteps. Oka nodded slightly, expressionless, and said indifferently, the fate of Crocodile has been doomed since the captain decided to become Chiwahai. After all, Chengji is too strong. Luo carried the ghost crying, and said coldly, among the people I have ever met, the captain is the most confident. There is no doubt that Hawkins is still a dead person, playing cards and saying something in a low voice. Confidence comes from strength. The captain is a real strong man. Every move must be full of self-confidence. This is something we cannot learn. 125. Smoker ignored Chris's words and attacked directly. Our captain is still so domineering. Arita is a beautiful woman who always carries a big iron rod, and her image is really not in line with the girls. She smiled charmingly and said elegantly, this is the colonel of the Navy headquarters, if you really kill him the Navy will definitely not let us go. Sweetheart Queen shrugged her shoulders and said casually, why would Chris care about this, it's impossible. This guy's character is strong and domineering, and he really doesn't care about this. Betty took a breath and nodded slightly. Agree. Nuauchi sighed and said with a wry smile, it seems that in a battle, it is unavoidable that Cayman will laugh with disdain, and his tone is very affirmative. If you don't have enough strength to talk to the Navy, how can you not fight? It's impossible for this Smog to let us go. Hearing Chris's words, the Navy was really stunned. He couldn't react at all to a pirate. He ran to the Navy and said that he wanted to become Shichibukai. It's a big joke. How can there be such an idiot pirate in the world, can't you? Chris, although young Master Ben hates you very much, your words are very appealing to young Master Ben. Cavendish was the first to react, and shouted at the man above the execution platform, saying, Chris, this young master approves of you. As long as you rescue this young master will join your team. The captain's position must be darker than this young master. So, isn't this young master's proposal very reasonable? The Navy who patted him on the head just now is really tired of Cavendish. Without saying a word, just take out the sealing sticker. What do you want to do, if you dare to seal this young master? Before Cavendish finished speaking, he was directly silenced, and he could only make a humming sound, staring at the Navy, very angry. The young Navy was not afraid of him, patted Cavendish's head again, and said viciously, be honest with me, you bastard, if you dare to make another moth. At that time, it will not be as simple as sealing. I promise to clean up your head and let you know why the flowers are so red. At this time, Dasichi was holding the famous sword Shiyu, and her fair and delicate face was full of surprise. It was inconceivable to say that this Chris, he was going to become Chiwahai. This is a joke. What kind of big man is Chiwahai? How could he possibly deserve it? Also, this guy is going too far. But speaking to the colonel like this, Dusky looked at Smog and said firmly, Lord Colonel, Chris is too arrogant. You must wait a moment. Strictly clean him up, let him know the prestige of our Navy, never allow him to be challenged, justice will win, and the colonel will win. Smoker stopped, put his hands on both sides, squeezed tightly, like a cigar, and said coldly, Chris, you are too arrogant. I really thought that with a reward of 100 million Baileys, I would be able to become Chiwahai. Ridiculous. See that guy behind me? With a disdainful look on his face, Smog sneered. That guy offered a reward of more than 90 million Baileys, and it won't be long before you will be locked into the Push City just like him. And you? Smog looked at Lafitte and the others, his eyes were cold, and his tone was very certain, and he said something like you Hazang. Don't try to escape, just stay in the Push City. With me here, no pirate can leave Rog Town. One hearing Smog's words, Bartius couldn't help laughing and said loudly, if that's the case, then let's fight, seeing who is stronger on the right. Wei ha ha ha. Ajin showed a cruel smile, his eyes were ruthless, speaking of which, I haven't fought the Navy yet, this is a good opportunity. Luo carrying the demon sword and crying, as always, he said coldly, the captain will take action personally on this matter, we can just watch it. It seems that the person who offered a reward of more than 10,000 yuan is our new member. Hawkins looked at Cavendish, who was tied into a scorpion, and said something deadly. Fan Yauka nodded lightly and said expressionlessly, the bounty is more than 90 million yuan, which shows his strength, it must be very good. He meets us, his fate is already doomed, and it must be one of the new members. Lafitte, who turned his cane and smiled slightly, looking like a gentleman, in such a weak place as Donghai, there is a total reward of more than 90 million yuan. Exist. Speaking of which, this is really incredible. Crow habitually pushed his glasses with his palm, and calmly analyzed, there is definitely no such a high bounty in the East China Sea, this person must be from other sea areas. Even, it is very likely that he ran out of the Great Waterway, so the bounty is so high. At this time, a cold voice came from above the execution platform. Smoker, one last reminder. Get out of here in 10 seconds. Chris put his arms around him, looked down at Smog condescendingly, his eyes gradually became cold, and he said calmly, otherwise, even if you don't die, you will be severely injured. Karina looked up at Chris, her beautiful eyes were shining, she smiled and said, don't say it, Chris looks so cool. Indeed, so domineering, very manly, ha ha, Nami nodded, and said something wisely. Alrita blinked her beautiful eyes, smiled charmingly, and said gracefully, "He is acting in his true colors, it can't be pretended." Carmen shrugged his shoulders, shook his head, and sighed, "Come right, Smoker is in trouble this time, and he has to peel off his skin if he doesn't die. The person who dares to be stubborn with Chris has not yet been born. He is courting the Queen's sweetheart." He stroked his pale blonde hair with a very positive tone. Betty took a breath and said calmly, "Want to fight with Chris, a mere colonel, where is enough? At least the lieutenant general of the headquarters has to be activated, which is almost the same." Seeing Chris so domineering and awe-inspiring, Cavendish's pupils shrank. He didn't make a sound, and his eyelids were covered with complicated expressions. Very angry, hating Chris for taking away his own aura, making him not the focus of the audience. At the same time, I am a little envious. If the person on the execution platform was replaced by myself, it would be so good. It is too arrogant and arrogant. Dasichi hugged Shiyu. Her beautiful eyes glared at Chris' figure, her pretty face was full of seriousness, and she said something in a firm tone. "This is the first time I have seen such a crazy pirate. In any case, we must catch them all in one net and not let them go. Bet on the name of justice and never fail." Smog raised his right hand and slowly pulled out the 10 hands of Hai Lushi, his eyes showing murderous intent, and said in a deep voice, "You dare to threaten me, Chris, you are impatient to live. I hope you are stronger, but don't let me kill you." With a swoosh, his body turned into a puff of white smoke, very thick, and quickly floated towards the top of the execution platform. 126. Chris stomped over Smoker. To the right of Smoker's body, white smoke came out again. Cavendish couldn't help frowning, and until now, he didn't know why his attack couldn't deal with Sho. Even if the slash is severe and the power is stronger, the result will be the same. Therefore, at this time, he opened his eyes wide and concentrated, wanting to see what Chris will do and whether he can hurt this guy Yuanj. If you can defeat the bastard Smog, then if this young master joins, it is not impossible to watch the same seriously. There are many people. Duddy Mastarson sat up straight, looked at the direction of the execution platform seriously, and said solemnly, "If there is no accident, Chris will be defeated with one move. After all, when it comes to the natural system, he has no choice at all, and the defeat is already determined." Lurgia knew Shogur. When she saw the white smoke on his body, she clapped her little hands and said with a smile that Uncle Smog's body was burning again. "When you got up to the right, it was fun, my father, Uncle Smog. Are you going to start catching pirates again?" Duddy Mastarson touched the little girl's head and said gently, "This time, it's a big pirate, your Uncle Smog. Fei Chong pays attention to it. The bounties of these people add up to several 100 million. Now, Uncle Smog, I am afraid that you will be promoted." Although he does not obey the orders of the headquarter and is alone, but this credit, the headquarter is a girl who will not kill it. Let's find your uncle and ask him to treat you to a lot of delicious food when he hears it. A sweet smile immediately burst out on the small eyelids. Clapping his little hands, he looked very happy, and his voice was immature and clear. All right, this is really good enough, tilde. In the east, everyone is also watching seriously, very concerned about this battle. Desia's beautiful eyes are not blinking, and her pretty face is full of dignified colors, and she said seriously, "Come on, the battle is finally over. Just look at Chris, is he really powerful?" Bartolomeo changed his rambunctious expression and said solemnly, "Sig is so powerful, there is no reason to lose to Chris. I just hope that the fight will be fiercer, so it will be interesting, ha 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 ha." The execution stand. Seeing that Smog launched an attack, Bashis couldn't help holding up his kidneys and said with a big laugh, "Jingran dares to shoot at the captain, way ha 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 ha." Poison Q was on Stallone, smiling strangely. The captain is notoriously ruthless, no one can disobey him. This navy, even if he didn't get killed, he still had to vomit some blood, hee. Ah Jin sneered, and said with disdain, "He's really tired of living, and he dares to attack the captain. Still so arrogant. That's fine, it's been a long time since the right-handed captain shot. This is a rare opportunity. Hawkins played the cards and said in a low voice, "From the looks of it, this Sig, if there is a bloody catastrophe against the captain today, it is impossible to be good." Yuka wrinkled his shoulder with a gun, and said expressionlessly, "This is his destiny." Crow pushed the mirror and looked up at the execution platform. He looked very rational, and said something. "Since joining the team, I have not seen the captain take a shot. This is a very rare time, and it is not easy." Lafitte adjusted the gift, and said politely, "At the level of the captain, it is indeed very difficult to see him take action. This is the so-called Master Ji Ming, Dugu seeks defeat." The girls were wearing smog floating in the air, and they were all curious. This is the second nature ability person who they have stayed in. Karina blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a look of surprise, "This is the so-called smoke fruit, and it's really interesting that it turns out white smoke." Nami nodded, her smile pure and sweet. "It looks white and bright, it's exactly the same as the smoke in nature, it's just thick smoke billowing. It's amazing." Kayame's eyes were bright and bright, her eyes kept moving with Smog's figure, and her beautiful and refined face showed admiration. "This evil fruit looks very strong, and it feels very mysterious." Carmen shrugged his shoulders, sneered, and said directly, "What's so powerful? With Chris' character, he can easily let him go, it's impossible, etc. There is only one result of meeting him, he must be lying on the ground, unable to stand." Sweetheart nodded lightly, BCE stroked her pale blonde hair, smiled and said, "I'm the same way. Since Chris shot, it must be a blow." At this time, Smoker was already flying higher and higher, with white smoke billowing behind him, spiraling forward, getting closer and closer to Chris. "The figure," Bu Wong said with a smile. "Chris kid, your indifferent appearance makes me very dissatisfied. I hope you can still talk like this later." Above the execution platform, there was a sound, and Chris disappeared directly, and he could not be found at all. Shock. Extremely shocking. Smog's pupils shrank with a look of horror on his face. He didn't understand at all how Chris disappeared before he could react, and a cold voice came from above. "Where are you looking, Smoker?" Shog was shocked again, and was about to look up, but unexpectedly, a terrifying force came from his back, and an incomparable pain hit. Squad made a shrill scream, which spread throughout the square. After listening to it, there was a creepy feeling. I saw that he was stomped on the back by Chris, who was like a meteorite, pierced through the void, and quickly smashed to the ground to rumble. The square vibrated, the ground cracked, and the smoke rose high, shrouding Smog, making it impossible to see what was inside. Quietly content. The entire square fell into silence, without the slightest sound. Everyone stared blankly at the place where the smoke and dust rose, their eyes unblinking, and they wanted to know what was going on inside. Like Duddy, Masterson, sitting up straight, looking at the center of the square, his face hanging, his eyesight was full of shock. Just now, Chris hit Smog's back in his ankle, but he saw that Chu-Sig was kicked. This really shocked him. Armed color domineering. Duddy Masterson looked surprised, and muttered to himself, "Chris, this young man, can actually use a newcomer who has not entered the Great Waterway. How can he achieve this step? This is simply unheard of, a situation that has never happened before." Lurgia shook her little feet, looked at him curiously, and asked with a smile, "Father, what's wrong with you? You seem to be shocked. Did you find something funny? Tell me now." Duddy Masterson came back to his senses, touched the little head of the girl in the picture, smiled bitterly, and said, "Fortunately we didn't move around, or else if so, it might cause trouble." Sure enough, being able to be offered a reward of 100 million Bailey is indeed very powerful and cannot be underestimated. 127. Shameless things for the face. Squadge lost. 7. He was actually stepped on the ground. Is this still Colonel Smog? Terrifying. Chris's strength is too scary. Bartolomeo nodded again and again, also with a look of horror, and said quickly, Qian, it's so powerful, I didn't see how he disappeared just now. People suddenly appeared on Smog, and then smashed the stain with one foot. It was too strong, so violent, so bloody. I liked it. Cavendish stared at the place where the smoke and dust rose, with an ecstatic look on his face, and he made a sound. Okay, great, give this young master a hard beating. This bastard Navy. Damn, it's all because of him, otherwise, how could the young master be unable to speak? At this moment, a light flashed in Cavendish's mind. His face was full of doubts, and he couldn't understand why he could attack Smoker. How can this young master use his sword? No matter how powerful the sword move is, it can't hurt him in the slightest. Chris, how did he do it? These Marines were startled one by one, and couldn't help but exclaimed, Lord Colonel, they have followed Smog for so long, and they have never seen him. This is the first time anyone has hurt him. It really shocked them. The famous knife in Dusky's hand, Shiu, fell to the ground, with a look of horror on her pretty eyelids. A damned colonel was stepped on. Dusky's beautiful eyes looked at the high smoke and she said in disbelief, Lord Colonel is a natural person who is capable of being hit. Chris, this bastard, who is he? How is he so powerful? Is this really a newcomer? Below the execution table, bosses looked at the cracked ground in front of him and laughed. The captain is really decisive. Don't say anything and step on it first. Way ha 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 ha. Poisonous Q coughed and said, the last time I had a fight with Doflamingo, didn't the captain say it? The villain died in the words of the captain, which is the essence of the battle. Luo carrying the demon knife and crying, Gao Leng said, when fighting, mother-in-law and mother-in-law are indecisive, this is not what a strong person should have. Quick and accurate, the first move is the ultimate move. This is the most correct way. Hawkins nodded, still looking like a dead man, and agreed, this point, we all need to bring those two strange shapes to Captain Akin. The weapon, the black face, showing the color of admiration, the tone is extremely respectful and said a sentence. The captain has always been a role model for me to learn from. I will closely follow the captain's footsteps and become stronger and stronger. Chloe pushed the mirror and said rationally, this point, the captain, is indeed worth advocating. The battle is clean and neat, never sloppy. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly, very politely, whether it is strength or character, the captain is worth learning from everyone. So we should be fortunate to have such a strong and perfect captain at this moment. A gust of wind blew, and a whirring sound blew all the smoke and dust in the air to the side, revealing the situation inside. The ground was cracked, and there were dense small cracks, like spider webs, spreading outward. At the center, Smog was lying there, with his back facing the heavenly chamber. His body was covered with dust, and his image was very desolate and desolate. Chris stepped on his head and pressed his head firmly on the ground. He was completely unable to see this scene. The people on the square were all shocked before everyone could react. When Chris's eyes turned cold, he said in a somber tone that something that should not be dangerous to his face. A mere colonel dares to attack me and wants to fight with me, so send a warship first. As soon as the voice fell, without any hesitation, he kicked Smog fiercely, beeping, and at the same time, there was a shrill scream. Shush flew upside down, spewing several mouthfuls of blood from his mouth, unable to stabilize his body at all, smashed straight on the ground, and rolled backwards continuously. When CJ stopped rolling, spit out a mouthful of blood again, and lay there straight, motionless, as if he was dead. At this time, his face was pale, as if he was seriously ill, and the scene of dying was shocked again. Everyone. Seeing Smog lying on the ground like a dead dog, everyone's faces were full of horror, their brains were stuck, and they couldn't turn at all. They were simply stunned. Colonel Dasky, this natural, he was the first to react, and after shouting in horror, without saying a word, he hurriedly ran towards Shog, and said with great concern, Lord Colonel, are you all right? The other navies didn't care about Cavendish at all. They hurried over one by one, worrying. Colonel Cavendish saves Smoker, who is like a dead dog, and his eyes are full of surprises. Was shocked by Chris to ask for flowers. Strong, really strong. Many times more domineering than this young master. It seems that this team can really join. Outside the square, Duddy and Mastarson saw this scene. His eyes were about to spit out, and he was extremely shocked to say that Smaug was defeated. He was beaten and vomited blood without any power to fight at all. This right-turned Chris' eyes were full of fear, and he murmured, "This strength, I'm afraid it's at the level of a lieutenant general, it's really too much. Strong. It's amazing, there are such powerful young people competing in the sea, and the Navy will definitely have a headache this time." Lurgia didn't hear her father's words at all. She closed her eyes slightly and was about to fall asleep on the east side of the square. The faces of these people were full of horror, and their eyes were about to fall to the ground. It was terrible. The little fellows spoke in unison, very frightened, and sent out a sense that Bartolomeo could no longer sit still, so he stood up directly, his eyes widened to the largest, and he was very shocked and said that Smaug had been beaten and vomited blood. Not at all. His opponent. Strong, Chris is too strong. Needless to say, Lao Su followed him and rushed to the Great Channel, ha ha ha. Quote. Desire shook his head and said in disbelief, a big man as strong as Smaug was even beaten by him. And it's still effortless. It can be seen that Chris's strength is so strong. That's right. Such a character is worth following. We chose him. Desire looked at Bartolomeo, with a beautiful and delicate face, showing a serious look, and said solemnly, Bartolomeo, let's go find Mrs. Tell Grandma about the situation here, and ask her if she can join the Chris Highway group and go to sea with them. I believe Mrs. Granny will definitely give good advice. Bartolomeo touched his nose ring, nodded, and said with a big smile, okay, then let's go there now, brothers, let's go first. Lord Heppo. After finishing speaking, he turned around and walked forward, not daring to waste time here. Yuan Zaya glanced at Chris' figure for the last time, frowned his beautiful eyebrows, and said to himself, he is so powerful, Grandma will definitely agree to join us. Without hesitation, he followed Bartolome and left here soon. 128. One Piece Roger's Navigator, officially appears. Outside view of the square. Looking at the tragic state of Sig, Daddy Mastarson couldn't help frowning, and put his right hand in his pocket to take out a gun. After all, he is also a righteous person, and he has different feelings for the Navy, so naturally he cannot accept this scene. This group of people is very difficult to deal with. If they really do it, I am afraid that they will hurt their daughter Duddy. Mastarson gently picked up Lurgia. For fear of waking her up, he stood up and walked forward. Fang go. Since he can't help Smaug, what are you doing here, seeing how miserable he looks? Liang Kuei, the two envoys left the square and disappeared until the disappearance of the captain. If he was ruthless, he wouldn't kick people to death. Wei ha 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 ha. Bosses raised his arms and laughed loudly. Spreading all over the square, Poison Q was lying on Stallone's face. His smile was still so ugly. He coughed and said, if it wasn't so ruthless, then I wouldn't be able to be the leader, chirping. Akin looked at Chris back, and said with great admiration, as expected of the minister, be quick and accurate, and kick K0. If you look at this situation, your internal organs will definitely be injured. Luo carried the demon knife and cried, as always, coldly. After saying 12 sentences, Jins nodded, put away the card, and said in a low voice, he didn't show death, it's just a bloody disaster, nothing will happen. Fan, Oka looked at Alfalfa Square and slapped his arm with a gun on his shoulder, and said with a blank face, there was a gunman just now, who seemed to want to attack us. Crow habitually pushed his glasses with his heart, and said rationally, he is a bounty hunter. As a gunman with a child, Duddy must have good eyesight. He must know that he is not the captain's opponent, and he will never dare to pull it out. Gun Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly and said, it's like the captain said that he wants to take action against us, so he will send a warship over. This time, the captain beat the colonel of the headquarters and showed his strength. I'm afraid the bounty will rise to 150 million. After talking, He walked directly to Cavendish and prepared to rescue him. He will serve as the deputy captain here. If it's a block, it's done very well, and there's no need for Christo to say anything, and he was beaten and vomited blood, so he deserved it. Karina turned her beautiful eyes, revealing a sly look, and said with a smile, "There is no one who dares to do something with Chris, and this is simply death." Perona nodded repeatedly, agreeing, "I thought it was natural. Those who are capable can be lawless, dreaming." Speaking of which, Chris didn't do anything ruthless, which was already pretty good. Queen Sweetheart stroked her pale blonde hair and we became Chihuahai. It's been a while since we became Chihuahai. At this time, it's better to have less than one thing. He ordered Betty to take a cigarette and said lightly, "It doesn't have much to do with this." Mainly because he didn't challenge Chris' bottom line, otherwise he would die. Arita smiled, her eyebrows curved, and she was very charming. After this time, our Chris Haiti group will definitely be famous all over the world. Near the execution platform, a simple private house. Knock knock tilde. Outside the door, there was a crisp knock on the door, and at the same time the voices of Bartolomeo and Desire were heard. "Grandma, open the door quickly, I'm looking for you." With a squeak, the wooden door was slowly opened, and an old woman came out. She was the so-called grandma. She held a newspaper in her hand and asked with an amiable smile, "You two little fellows, have you caused something else? What's the matter? Tell me, as long as you say it. Grandma will forgive your Desire for brushing her red and yellow hair, and on her beautiful eyelids, showing a sweet and lovely smile, and said a word quickly. "Nope, Grandma. We came to you for other things." At this time, Bartolomeo saw the newspaper in Grandma's hand, his eyes lit up, and he quickly explained, "Grandma, what we want to say is Chris on the newspaper. Just now, he came to Rog Town and fought with Smog at the execution stand." Shaking his head, he continued, No, this is a one-sided battle. Without a fight, Smog was directly killed by Chris, and he didn't even have the strength to resist. He was lying on the ground like a dead dog. By the way, Chris said that he will go to the Great Channel next, and then he will kill Kibui Crocodile and become Chihuahai himself. Now he is recruiting new people at the execution platform. We want to join his team. Do you think we can do it? Hearing this, the grandma, who had always held the pearl in her hand, showed surprise on her eyelids, and said in disbelief, "You said just now that Si Yuanj was defeated by him." Wrinkling his sparse white eyebrows, his old face was full of doubts, and he said something to himself. Smog is a natural ability person, and was defeated by Chris. It seems that the strength of this young man is much stronger than I thought. He has not yet entered the Great Waterway, but he has learned that special ability. He is a young man with potential. No wonder the Navy is offering a reward of 100 million Baileys. Grandma looked at Bartolomeo and Desire, smiled amiably and said, "Since he is recruiting new members, if you are interested, then go to sea. Staying in Rog Town, you can't grow up, you might as well go to the Great Waterway and learn more about Dongguo. I guess it is good. This little guy Chris will definitely become Chihuahai and Ruohei. Yours the future is still very good." Desire's beautiful eyes lit up, a look of joy appeared on her pretty face, and she said with a sweet smile, "Master Grandma, do you think so too? I am also very optimistic about Chris. I think he will become a big man in Dangdang in the future, and there must be people who follow him." Bartolomeo touched his nose ring, his smile was very ugly, like a ghost, and said that since Mrs. A 593 does not object, then we will let him go to sea. "Grandma, when we encounter a problem, we will call you and ask you for help. Bai Jing, you are the wisest old man in the town and the one who knows the most." Grandma waved her hand and said gently, "Okay. Now, hurry up, don't let them wait too long. Grandma is here waiting for your triumphant return. Remember to tell Grandma about all kinds of super things about the journey." Desire and Bartolomeo nodded quickly, bowed to Grandma, and said in unison, respectfully, "Then let's go, see Grandma again." After speaking, the two of them didn't hesitate, turned around quickly, and walked towards the execution platform. Grandma stood quietly and watched them leave. On the vicissitudes of life, the color of memories appeared, and she said to herself, Roger, that's right, the era of big sailing has really come to the current sea. It's getting more and more lively, and countless newcomers have emerged, all of whom are full of potential and are all seed players in the new era. After some wind and rain, they will surely thrive and become towering trees, deterring the whole sea to see such a lively scene. You must be very happy, Roger. Grandma shook her head slightly, and without thinking any more, she gently closed the wooden door and continued to read the newspaper. 129. The invitation to travel around the world ends, and enter the Great Channel. Chris put his arms around him, looked at Dusky and the others calmly, and said lightly, Give you a minute, leave here immediately. Hearing his words, all the Navy were startled. Chi-Chi turned right towards Chris with angry expressions on his eyelids. At the same time, with a look of panic, for fear that Chris would kill them, Dusky didn't care about this, hugged Shiu, and stood up quickly, pretty dangerous and frosty, very angry Chris, you are a sea, dared to threaten the Navy. Before I finished speaking, I was interrupted by Smoker. At this time, Smog had been supported by the Navy, vomited blood and coughed and said, Let's go, you are not his opponents, let's leave here. Chris' eyes turned right, with a look of fear. He was afraid of the young man's strength. He was much stronger than him. But the pain from his body reminded him all the time that this young man is so powerful. Dusty heard this. Heenhan gave Chris a glance, turned his head to look at the Navy, and said directly, Let's get out of here. A young Navy looked at Smog and asked, Lord Colonel, what should I do with Cavendish, the prisoner with a bounty? Smog looked like a man, and said weakly, He is already a member of the Chris Hayward Regiment, and we have to urge these navies without him. If it really takes more than 1 minute, I am afraid that everyone will be killed by Chris. I can see it clearly. Chris, this young man, is definitely a ruthless person, and he will not reason at all. Yes, Your Honor, Colonel. The Navy agreed, and without delay, they hugged him quickly, walked out of the square quickly, and quickly disappeared. Seeing the back of the Navy walking away, Bashas couldn't help laughing, and said aloud that if we meet us, even the colonel of the headquarters can only run away obediently. Way ha 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 ha. Poisonous Q smile is very ugly, said, It's a pity, why don't you stay for a while? I really want to see what the captain will do in a minute. Agent glanced at him and said indifferently, Aren't you talking nonsense? If they dare to stay here, they will challenge the captain's bottom line, and the result can only be one. Sheikh Luo habitually pushed his glasses. The reason is divided. He should go back to the naval branch now and start contacting the headquarters. Next, the captain's bounty will definitely skyrocket. Luo, carrying the ghost cry, said coldly, The colonel of the headquarters is directly harassed and abused. Even if they don't know the strength of the captain, at least they will be rated as lieutenant general. It should not be difficult for the bounty to reach 200 million. Hawkins nodded. Deadly, at that time, it will surely shock the world and become a hot topic in the sea. At this time, the women were discussing another topic. Karina looked at Cavendish in front of her, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, This guy looks very handsome and handsome. I don't like this kind of little white danger. I hate it when I look at it. Paula floated in the air, shook her little head, and said something with a wrinkled face. Nami patted Karina's fragrant shoulder and said with a big grin, If we are to be handsome, our captain must be the first. Nuauchi nodded and agreed, Chris's looks are indeed very good. Everyone thinks about looks, but it's not summer. Meidi pulled up her pale blonde hair and smiled with a smile. He said, The most attractive thing about Chris is his unique temperament. Erika carried the big black iron rod, smiled gracefully and generously, and followed, This is the charm of the strong man's own halo. Sweetheart shrugged her shoulders and smiled sweetly, A man with a domineering look is not just kidding. At this time, Lafitte has come to Cavendish and said with a slight smile, Look at you. Ah, it looks like it's suffocating. Without hesitation, he tore off the seal on Cavendish's face. Great, my young master can finally speak. Cavendish heaved a sigh of relief and said quickly, hurry up and untie this young master. These bastards are so mad that the navy is too tight. Hearing what he said, Basharston in the distance was not happy, sneered, and said with disdain, "Is this guy an idiot? It's ridiculous that they are all tied up like this, and they call themselves the young master." Poison Q smiled strangely and said, "I don't think he should be allowed on the boat, just kill him and finish." Luo glanced at Cavendish, and said coldly, "There is a swordsman missing on the boat, and now we can make up for it." Hawkins said in a low voice, "Judging from his appearance, he is a very talented swordsman." Fett, who is full of strength, did not care about Cavendish, and helped him untie the shackles on his body. He said politely, "First of all, welcome to join Chris Pirates. I'm the vice captain of the regiment, Lafitte. Next, let me tell you about the rules on the ship and future plans." At this moment, outside the square, a group of people appeared. One by one, like little gangsters, they walked towards Chris. Makino blinked her beautiful eyes, with a curious look on her beautiful and dignified eyelids. She said softly, "Are they going to join us too? It looks like a gangster." Carmen smiled and affirmed in his tone, "It doesn't seem like it. These people looked like they were gangsters in the East just now. They thought they had left, but they ran back." Karina smiled disdainfully, very disgusted like Bartolomeo they. Alrita smiled sweetly and gracefully, "Except for that woman, don't get on the boat, what kind of stuff are they?" Maidie nodded lightly, stroked her hair, and continued, "I don't like gangsters either, so I don't have a good impression of them." Soon, a group of people came to Chris, led by Bartolomeo, and bowed Captain Chris to Chris. "We want to join the pirate group. I don't know if we can." Bassos was the most direct, very dissatisfied, and shouted angrily, "You little bastards, what qualifications do you have to join us? Don't laugh at me." Agent carried the two strangely shaped weapons and said indifferently, "The captain's eyes are always vicious, so let the captain make the decision." Crow pushed his glasses and said calmly and rationally, since they dared to come up to sign up, and the courage was still not small. At this time, Chris spoke up and said calmly, "Okay." When I walked outside the square and heard what he said, everyone's reaction was completely different. "Thank you Captain Chris for your stay. Bartolomeo et al." All smiles, very happy, very excited. Originally, they thought that Chris would refuse or eliminate some people, but they didn't expect that Jingran would join in so easily. It was really like a good money dream. Since the captain said so, then there must be a reason for him. Luo coldly glanced at Bartolomeo and the others, did not stay too long, followed directly behind Chris and walked forward. Bassos shrugged his shoulders and said helplessly, "Since the captain said so, then I can only recognize it. The captain brought so many people up to make them cannon fodder." Hee. Poison Q rode Stallone, coughed and said something. Agent looked at these newcomers and said in a cold tone, "Since you have joined the team, then I will tell you the rules of getting off the ship. Listen, I will only say it once. If you haven't heard it, don't ask me about Bartolome." Al and others nodded again and quickly responded with a yes, "We will listen carefully." Then, a group of people stepped forward and walked towards the outskirts of Rog Town, preparing to go to the Great Waterway Mission. 130. All the girls cultivate, work hard to become stronger, and don't hold back Chris. Chris, above deck. This is the magical ship that sourly ate the nightmare fruit, and it really is very different. Desia's beautiful eyes were looking around, and her beautiful and fair eyelids were full of happiness, as if she had discovered something extraordinary. Karina patted her fragrant shoulder, her beautiful eyes flowed, and she said with a smile, "This ship is the strongest sea ship in the world, its speed is astonishingly fast, and it can also change." Nami blinked her eyes and smiled sweetly and innocently, "Although I have never seen the speed of a warship, I believe that the Chris must be faster." After leaving Rog Town, the next step is the Great Channel, that magical sea. Alrita carried the big iron rod and looked at Rog Town, which was gradually disappearing, with a look of expectation and excitement on her pretty face. At this time, Cavendish pointed his right hand diagonally to the sky, and said very happily, "Yes, very good. When the battle for captain begins, and this young master becomes the captain, then this feeding boat belongs to this young master. Ha ha." Suddenly, he felt behind him. A breeze blew, and just as I was about to turn my head, I suddenly felt a pain in my neck. I saw it closed instantly, fell onto the deck, and passed out. Stunned. Everyone looked at Chris with puzzled eyes, wondering why he did this. After all, Chris doesn't care about the crew at all and lets them fight. Why did he start this time? It really confuses people. At this moment, with a swipe, Cavendish stood up straight. 090 Cavendish's eyes showed crazy killing intent, and he smiled cruelly and said, "I woke up again, kill you tilde." Seeing his appearance, everyone was startled, and Bartolomeo's eyes widened, and he said with surprise, "This. How did he become like this? It's completely different from the Cavendish just now. It was just the two of them." Bashes laughed and said loudly, "It's an amazing guy, and his murderous aura is very strong." Poison Crinkle he frowned, and in the vicissitudes of life, he rarely showed doubts. What happened to this guy? Why did he suddenly change into a person? Right, inside his body, a devil was sleeping. Chloe habitually pushed his glasses, calmly analyzed, and said something. When he passed out or fell asleep, the ghost would be released. The old man discovered the problem, and now he has to find a way to solve it. Lafitte turned his cane, left Crow, smiled slightly, and said humbly, "Your analysis is very accurate. If your strength is stronger, then when you become the deputy captain, your role will be much greater." Hawkins looked at Lafitte, still dead, and said in a low voice, "From the looks of it, he didn't have the life of being a deputy captain. These men are better, but for the women, they feel a little scared." BCCD calmed down in the face of Cavendish, a killing machine. This is really scary. Needy patted her heart and looked at Cavendish with a look of fear, really frightened. Kia ordered a little pith bag, and dared not continue to look at Cavendish. Gia Lee's refined face looked pale and then said something. "I was also frightened. This person looks really scary." Makino hugged her in her arms, patted her back, and said softly, "It's okay, Chris is here, no need to do it." "I'm afraid." Karina frowned her beautiful Louis eyebrows and said in disbelief, "What's going on with this guy? Why does it feel like he was made of two people?" "The hell knows." Arita sneered and said very dissatisfiedly, "In his situation, if we don't solve it, we are all in danger." Carmen nodded and agreed, "He is indeed a mentally ill person. With him, he may be cut off." At this time, Cavendish looked at Chris, full of murderous intent, with a crazy look on his eyes, and said a sentence: "Lousy kills you first, and then slowly kills others." After that, Durandal was pulled out and launched a violent attack. With a bang, Chris came to him in an instant, put his right hand on his neck, and reached out to Cavendish. He was shocked and was shocked. Before he could even hide, he was directly strangled by Chris. He lifted his right leg up, and his knee slammed into Cavendish's stomach. His neck was strangled. Cavendish couldn't speak at all. He groaned, his eyes bulged, and his face showed a very painful look. With a bang, he was thrown off the deck, his back arched, like a dead shrimp, very miserable. Luo transplanted him, took out the soul of this guy. Chris put his hands in his trouser pockets, looked at Luo calmly, and said lightly, "Cavendish has two personalities now, only know how to kill. It will come in handy in future battles. It's a good combat power." Hearing Chris's words, everyone quickly looked at Cavendish. Everyone was surprised that Bosses was the most direct, and said with a big smile, "No wonder it looks different before and after. It turned out to be two personalities." Poison Q's eyes were ruthless, and he smiled strangely. "This kind of body is very interesting. It can be used for experiments. It's really good. The world is so big, it really is full of wonders, and there are still people like this." Chloe pushed his glasses, and his serious face showed a rare look of awe. He really couldn't believe Luo carrying the demon knife and crying, looking at Babo. said, "Go and catch a dog, whatever size you want." Beppo didn't hesitate, turned around quickly, and walked towards the poultry area. Padang came to its shoulders and said with a smile, "Why are you walking so fast? Wait for me." Ajin looked at Luo, with a rare smile, and praised, "Very good. I have long seen that this guy is not going well, so he transplanted him into a dog, and humiliated him. Oka hit him with a gun." He shrugged his sore shoulders and said with a blank face, "A guy who has never even heard of domineering is really too arrogant." Vashus held up his arms and laughed loudly, very good, put him on the dog, and then see how he will be the young master, way ha 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 ha." Bartolomeo smiled and touched his nose ring. It was very difficult to say, at that time, "If there is nothing, I will be responsible for all the dogs. These guys are tough enough." Queen Sweetheart looked at Betty, stroked her pale blonde hair, and said with a smile, "But that's fine, I'm not used to this Cavendish." Betty took a breath and remained calm as always. "I don't have the strength, I'm still so arrogant, I deserve to be apologetic." Ju touched her delicate chin. She was slim, and she said very elegantly and generously, "But speaking of it, Captain Luo's surgical ability is indeed very powerful. Even the mind can be transformed. What a powerful devil fruit." Bakara nodded lightly, folded her crimson hair, and said with a sweet smile, "Actually, each of these squad leaders has great potential. Under the leadership of Chris, the speed of their growth will only get faster and faster and will not stop." Alrita carried the big iron bar, smiled charmingly and sweetly, and said in awe, "Compared with them, our strength has improved too slowly. Although I am also cultivating domineering, I can't always find the essentials. I really have no talent for cultivation." Carmen waved his hand and retorted with a smile. "Basically, 3 days of fishing and 2 days of drying nets, so the strength must be greatly improved." Karina's beautiful eyes flowed, revealing a sly color, and said with a smile, "So everyone has to work hard, you can't draw Chris back, hey?" Nami nodded, smiled sweetly, and said carelessly, "That's for sure, I'm practicing hard now, and one day I'll learn to be armed and domineering." At this moment, the sound of footsteps came, and at the same time Pa Dong's crisp voice sounded. "Boss, bring the dog, it's a black dog." Pa Dong jumped and jumped, smiling, very happy. I saw the black dog that Babo was holding. It was very small, with jet black fur and looked very strong. This is the Cavendishly personality, the next shelter. 131. If you dare to make trouble again, I will strangle you directly. Everyone did not continue to speak. All eyes were on Luo, waiting to see his performance. Luo glanced at the little black dog. Without hesitation, he turned his left palm toward the center of his hand, and snorted lowly. A translucent ball of light appeared in an instant. It looked beautiful and had a great sense of picture. Without saying a word, Luo pulled out the demon sword. Ghost crying, facing the little black dog in Bebo's arms, stabbed with a swipe, a pink heart slowly flew out of the little black dog. At this time, there was a gap between this love and the little black dog. There is also a silk thread attached. The two are not separated from such a strange scene. Everyone is full of amazement. They are very envious of Muluo's fruit of this ability. It is really a very strange fruit of evil. Crow habitually pushed his glasses and said calmly and rationally, "Even the mind can manifest. I have to say that this ability is indeed very powerful." Ajin looked at Luo's pale face, frowned and said, "Luo is still very reluctant to control this ability, and he can't handle it easily." "Already very good." Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly, and looked very polite. If it wasn't for the specific development method given by the captain, Luo would not be able to do this step now. It can only be said that all this is thanks to the captain. This credit cannot be buried. Miggins nodded slightly, agreeing and saying, "The captain really has his own set for the development of the evil fruit, which is very powerful." At this moment, with sweat on his forehead, Luo stabbed Cavendish lying on the deck. With a swipe, another pink heart, with silk threads, flew out of Cavendish's body. At this time, the two hearts, shining under the sunlight, looked very beautiful. All the girls sighed in unison, and their beautiful eyes looked at them carefully. They didn't expect that their minds were so interesting and attractive. Luo Shance's father was powerless, gritted his teeth, and his 2 fingers seemed to be hanging something heavy, and it was very difficult to shake it. Immediately, the 2 minds exchanged, and quickly submerged into the bodies of both sides, disappearing. Luo was exhausted, crying with the demon sword, and almost fell on the deck. He was so tired that he was obviously about to collapse. The little black dog, with his eyes open, burst into madness with cold killing intent. He jumped up and rushed towards the nearest Babo. His small claws were extremely sharp, and Xinli's teeth showed a crazy look on his face. This change suddenly scared everyone. All the girls exclaimed in unison, "Ah, Babo is the most timid, save the little black dog's cold and stern eyes. Where can he stand?" He plopped, and was directly scared on deck. He could only watch the little black dog pounce with horror on his face, motionless, and completely frightened. At the critical moment, when the danger was like an egg, with a swoosh, Chris came to Babo in an instant, with his big hand facing the little black dog's neck. "One hard. Bring it up in front of you," looking at each other. Chris's eyes narrowed, and the domineering arrogance radiated out. He charged directly at the little black dog and listened to me. "I will only say it once. I'm not Dad. What are you? If you dare to make trouble again, I'll strangle you to death." After he finished speaking, he threw the little black dog out, like an arrow from the string, slammed into the mainmast and slid directly onto the deck. The body hugged in a circle, shivering, and looked at Chris with extreme fear, as if looking at a devil. Although it only knows about killing, it is not without consciousness. It can still think about the fact that it really felt death just now. The strong sense of crisis is the moment it has never experienced before, and it thought that it would be strangled to death. It can't live without fear, panic, all kinds of negative emotions shrouded it, and it doesn't dare to mess around anymore. The captain is really amazing. Bashes raised his arms and laughed loudly. "Even this guy is afraid of the captain." Wei ha 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 ha. Gao Q smiled slyly and said, "The captain's domineering arrogance is used to deter a black dog. This is not something. Has the price dropped?" Fan Yiyuka covered his shoulders with a gun, and said with a blank face, "When I meet the captain, his fate is already doomed. This time, this character will definitely not dare to mess around." Crow was extremely calm and said lightly. Lafitte adjusted his top hat, smiled slightly, and said very gentlemanly, "If he dares to mess around, I will kill him without the captain's action." A mere personality is not an indispensable existence. Where can he be allowed to be unrestrained here on such a ship? Except for the captain, who cannot be lacking, everyone else is irrelevant. Ajin nodded and said indifferently, "Dare to fight with us. He did choose the wrong person to kill him. It's a matter of minutes." All the girls looked at Chris. Their beautiful eyes were full of brilliance, and they couldn't help but praise Karina's curly brows, her perfectly fair face, full of admiration, smiled and said, "Our captain is still so angry. What a man." Alrita nodded and said with a sweet smile, "This kind of domineering spirit is really admirable." Calvin smiled and praised, "Chris is a real man." Betty took a breath and said lightly, "It is still fierce and domineering as always, and it has never changed. Needless to say, it is extremely strong." Queen Sweetheart stroked her hair, smiled, and sighed with emotion about Desire. Bartolomeo and the others stared blankly at Chris' figure, and praised them all. At this moment, Cavendish woke up, with an angry look on his face. He scolded, "Who hit Master Ben just now?" and stood up. "Also, what did you do to this young master just now? Why do you always feel that something is missing? Say, what the hell is going on here?" "The matter has been done." Chris did not hesitate, and walked directly to the training room. Baccarat looked at Desire, with his eyebrows curled, his crimson hair tucked together, and said with a gentle smile, "Desire, let's go to the training room. Go have a chat." Desire nodded, with a sweet and charming smile, and responded, "Okay, I just watched Lord Chris practice." Then, the girls didn't stay here. talking and laughing, and followed Chris to leave Beppo. What are you doing? So timid. Padong jumped up and came to Bebo, and said very dissatisfiedly, it seems that your courage needs to continue to be exercised, but you were scared by a little black dog. No, starting today, I'm going to strengthen your training. Bebo with a slightly ashamed look on his face. I don't want to do this either, it's just because the character is too fierce, and the eyes look so cold. Bassos looked at Cavendish, shrugged his shoulders, and said disdainfully, okay, don't keep calling yourself the young master, it's annoying to hear it. Your strength is not so strong, don't always be too arrogant, be careful to flatten you. Gao Q turned right at Bassos, with a stern smile, or kill him directly, when the captain asks you for trouble, I will intercede for you. Ajin has always been disliked by Poison Q, but this time, he agreed with him, nodded, and continued, I'm also very disgusted with this guy, I really treat myself as a character. If he continues to be so flamboyant later, I don't mind teaching him how to behave. Hawkins looked at Ajin, still deadly, from the looks of it, you are not his opponent. Fanyoka said with a serious face, then my gun is faster, or his sword is faster. Crow habitually pushed his glasses, looked at Cavendish, and suggested, I advise you to restrain yourself, otherwise you won't have a good life. After all, none of these people on the boat are kind-hearted, and they may fight at any time. After you watch and say it yourself, go straight to the side and start to practice. Knowing, domineering, or Lafitte's most popular new member, smile slightly. Said gentle and elegant, actually, there is nothing to do, just strip out the inner personality from your body. Pointing at the little black dog who was still shivering, he politely said, at this time, the monster in your body lives on this dog. Cavendish, as co-captain, I have to advise you too. If you don't have the strength, you'd better keep a low profile, otherwise this dog will be your fate. Lafitte glanced around at them, and said very gentlemanly, after all, Xiaocheng has always been concerned about things, so he won't have any constraints on them. If you accidentally get killed one day, I can't help you. You must remember this. Don't say anything more, and go to the side to practice. Hearing the irony and threats of these people, Cavendish really wanted to pull out Durandal and fight them hard, but in the end he didn't dare to fart and fell silent. He hid all his anger and dissatisfaction in his heart, and he was no longer so narcissistic because he had fully understood that the people on this ship, all ruthless, would not care about his appearance at all, nor did he will let him make any small temper. In short, as the rules of the ship say, the strong are respected. Without strength, he has no status, no one will pay attention to him, and will accommodate him. If he is still as narcissistic as before, I am afraid that he will be killed by these people sooner or later. There is no other possibility. This young master is good, very good, I will wait for this young master. When the battle for the squad leader starts, I can see that this young master doesn't humiliate you severely. The damned guys, Cavendish, are constantly changing, and they are extremely angry. His self-esteem is like a volcano about to erupt. Hurt, full of hatred for them. Become stronger. There has never been a moment, like now, that the desire to become stronger. Cavendish wakes up, secretly determined to avenge today's revenge. 132. The Navy headquarters, all shocked by Chris. One day later. Rogue Town, Naval Station, inside the office. At this time, there are 3 people here, Smog, Dasky, and Ghost Spider. Lieutenant General Shog. As a colonel of this division, you have been defeated by a pirate newcomer, Ghost Spider, and you look at Smog. With a strong disdain, you are very dissatisfied and reprimanded. You are disgracing the Navy and smearing justice. Do you know how much mistake you have made? It seems that I need to report to the headquarters, revoke your colonel rank, transfer you out of here, and return to the headquarters to continue your studies. Bai Jing, the justice of the Navy, must not be tarnished. You're a sinner, Shrang. Hearing this, Dasichi frowned and hurriedly explained the Lieutenant General, please listen to me. Chris's speed was so fast that it was impossible for anyone to see him clearly. Moreover, he also has a domineering armament and can use it skillfully. Dasky looked at Sigij with a helpless look on his pretty face, and said with a wry smile, Lord Colonel really tried his best and didn't mean to let Chris go. In this battle, the Colonel's internal organs were severely damaged, and it took a long time to recover before he could fully recover. So please, Lieutenant General, please be considerate, Colonel. Before he could finish speaking, Smog interrupted him. And a cigar, he was very dissatisfied and said, Dusky, you woman, what did you say? Will Lao Su be afraid of his report? What a joke. The department dismissed my post. Do those guys have the guts? Impossible Ghost Spider, if you have one, you can report it to the top and let them lose my military rank. If you can succeed, then I will admire you. The Ghost Spider didn't pay attention to Smog's words. He knew the character of this guy very well. The typical Gia Vulture did not listen to Shug's words. How could he be afraid of his threat? He would use it after thinking too much. Armed and domineering, this is a major event that cannot be waited for. Ghost Spider looked at Dasky and said solemnly, tell me about it and report the details to me. The Ghost Spider's face line has become a little more reconciled. Dasky is very happy in his heart, and he finally doesn't have to be so nervous. Lord Lieutenant General, as soon as Chris landed in Rog Town, he completely ignored the Navy and went directly to Roger's execution platform to summon a new one. Member. Afterwards, we rushed there, looking at the Ghost Spider. Dusky looked serious on his white and beautiful eyelids, and said very firmly, Chris will arrive at the Kingdom of Alabasta in a short time. Then he will challenge Crocodile. This is inevitable, Lieutenant General. I think it is better for you to report this situation to the headquarters. If Chris succeeds, I'm afraid it will cause a lot of trouble. The Ghost Spider took a breath, frowned, and said with disdain, I really thought that if he was armed and domineering, he would be able to defeat Crocodile. What kind of thing is he? Chihuahua is to maintain the order of the sea. If it was so weak, it would have been removed and replaced long ago, and it would have waited until now. However, you really need to report the situation you mentioned. After letting the headquarters do the final decision, without any hesitation, he took out the phone bug and dialed Malin Fando from the Navy headquarters. Inside the office, there were a lot of people sitting, at least at the level of a major general. They were sitting at a meeting in the Warring States period. They glanced at everyone present, and said very seriously, the sea has become more and more noisy these days. The Revolutionary Army in the South China Sea was active frequently, but it did not move the people at the bottom, but launched a revolutionary movement. Many government-affiliated countries have called for help and asked the Navy to come forward to quell the war. Beihai Germa, a warmonger, has also behaved very abnormally recently. He is nesting in Beihai and does not go out to earn commissions. He seems to be plotting something. There is also Boyahan Cook, who caused huge turmoil in the New World, and defeated several big pirates with bounties of hundreds of millions in a row. Warring States set the table. His face was extremely grim, and he said in a deep voice, the influence of the Navy has been seriously damaged and measures must be taken. If this continues, people all over the world will inevitably question the combat effectiveness of the Navy, which is not conducive to our management of this sea. Well, now everyone is talking about how to increase the influence of the Navy. How to ensure the stable operation of the sea. Sakaski sat up straight, with a firm face and a solemn expression. For the sake of absolute justice, we cannot tolerate any longer. I suggest to send troops immediately to eradicate the cancer of Germa. At the same time, I personally lead the troops to the South China Sea and wipe out all the revolutionary troops. Doberman nodded and echoed. General Sakaski said, yes, the justice of the Navy has been challenged. In order to implement absolute justice, we must strike hard and use force to deter the entire sea. Only in this way can the problem be solved fundamentally. The generals of the Hawk faction nodded quickly. All of them were very serious. They were all typical militant Pelusolino chairs, with Erlang's legs crossed, their nails clipped, and said casually, actually, there is nothing to say, anyway, it's all about those issues. I'll stop discussing these things. I'd better leave the meeting early. After all, discussions come and go, but the results are still the same. The green pheasant yawned and said with a languid look, "It's so tiring to always move the navy. I'm still sleeping, I'm a little sleepy. Dove generals, I heard Aokiji say so. Have to speak, keep silent." At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps, and I saw Branchwang holding a phone bug, and above it was the Marshal of Ghost Spider, reporting a situation to you. Seeing the phone bug in Branu's hand, the generals all quieted down, stopped discussing the Warring States period, glanced at the phone bug, and said directly, "Ghost Spider, if you have something to say, I'm in a meeting." Ghost Spider took a breath and said respectfully, "Master Marshal, I just came to Rog Town to report the situation here to you. Just yesterday, the Chris pirates landed in Rogue Town." Ghost Spider looked solemn and said very seriously, "With Chris's strength, if you start a fight against Crocodile, the result is really hard to say. Marshal, the situation report is over, please give instructions." Shock. All the generals here were shocked by the goose. Chris will be armed and domineering. And even Sig, a natural power user, was killed. Most importantly, he wanted to become Chiwahai. The series of big news really shocked everyone, and they couldn't react at all. Porosalino tilted his head and said strangely, "It's too scary, the newcomers are so scary now." The Sakar's curtain sank dangerously, and he said loudly, "Damn see, we must not spare them. The Warring States Marshal, please give an order, no matter what. We must do our best to destroy the Chris pirates, and we must not let justice be discredited." Hawk's generals. Filled with righteous indignation, Chi-Chi said, "They must be killed for justice." Xiaoshan shook his head, exhaled the smoke from his mouth, and said in awe, "Who is this Chris, and how is he so powerful? This has not yet entered the Great Channel, so many things have happened. If you let him in, you won't have to turn the sea upside down." The mouse frowned, extremely confused, and said, "I am shocked that he is a newcomer. How can he use domineering? In a place where the four seas are so weak, I have never heard of a newcomer from Heizang who can have such a rare seriousness of Nohichi pheasant," and said lightly, "Another newcomer with great potential. It seems that the pusher of the times, one more." T-Dolphin shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, "This kid Chris is really good at tossing. He has been holding back for many years in order to go to sea. This is the so-called Kishi Jufa." The blockbuster Tautu did not speak, leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, put his arms around him, and listened to their conversation quietly. "Is it finally time to enter the Great Channel? It seems that in a few days, the position of Chiwahai will be left to him. Chris is progressing so fast, I have to speed up my side and take Na early, so I can't delay any longer." At this time, Sengoku patted the table, attracted everyone's attention, and with a solemn expression on his face, he said solemnly, "We underestimated Chris' strength, which is absolutely certain that we originally thought that he was a potential rookie. Not only does he have great potential, but he is also extremely powerful. Everyone knows Shug's combat power, at least at the level of a major general, but he is not even Chris' opponent, and he was even defeated by one move. It can be seen that Chris's strength must be at the level of a lieutenant general." Warring States' eyes sank, his face extremely serious, and he said in a deep voice, "A young man of about 19 years old has such a strong combat power. This has never happened in the world. Now he even proposes to be Chiwahai. Judging from this situation, I am afraid that Crocodile will be his stepping stone. If this is the case, then the sea will definitely vibrate on 5.1. This is absolutely not allowed." Turning to look at the staff of the crane, and asking for advice, "Xiaohei, I will leave it to you, we will listen to your opinions. Generals, all look at staff he, waiting for the analysis of this naval think tank. Cross your hands and support Dad's chin. Wisdom keeps flashing in his eyes." The old voice said that the Warring States period is right. We really underestimated Chris' strength. This is beyond doubt. Originally, I thought that a reward of 100 million Bailey was enough. But now, his bounty can reach at least 250 million Bailey. To be honest, this guy gave me a very mysterious feeling. Like the clothes he wears, black represents domineering and weird. Quan looked at the generals present, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said slowly, I personally think that the strength he has shown now is just the tip of the iceberg. Many of his trump cards are still submerged in the water and have not surfaced. From my analysis, his strength may only reach the level of an elite lieutenant general, which is unbelievable, but I believe that is the case. 133. Chris's bounty has risen too terrifyingly. After hearing the analysis of staff all the generals were shocked. Elite lieutenant, what a terrifying existence. It was really scary. Xiaohei, your analysis is very accurate, and the old man also saw Garp sitting up straight, showing a rare expression of seriousness, and said very seriously, Smog Kid's powerful major general is not his opponent at all. Chris was able to defeat him with one move, and even if he couldn't reach the elite lieutenant general, he would still be the same. Palua Leno leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and said with a yin-yang yin and yang, young people today are really scary. The strength of the lieutenant general is always enough to scare the old man to death. Sakaski's eyes were firm, and he said with a serious face, since he is so powerful, it can't be delayed. If he continues to grow, then the justice of the Navy will inevitably be severely provoked. This is absolutely not allowed. Nodded, his eyes cold, General Sakaski is right, if this goes on, it will only make Chris even more maddened. If he does defeat K-12 Rockdale, the consequences are not envisaged. Aokiji leaned against the chair, Yang Yang said, now he should enter the Great Channel, if he wants to chase, he has to hurry up. Whispering Rat put his arms around him, looked at the Warring States period, and suggested to the Marshal. I think we must prepare both hands. If the Ghost Spider wins the Chris Pirates ahead of time, then it is naturally the best. But the Ghost Spider couldn't catch up, and Crocodile was killed again. Is the position of Chiwahai real? Is empty? This is a serious question, and it is worth pondering. T-Dolphin soured the table and said with a smile, from all circumstances, Chris is strong and cold, with a very calm personality. So in the battle between him and Crocodile, I think the loser must be Crocodile. The question to consider now is whether to let Chris become Kibukai, or let Lieutenant General Ghost Spider continue to hunt him down. That's it, it's not that complicated. Tautu nodded and made a rare remark, no one knows how strong Chris is, and everyone knows the strength of Crocodile. For this battle, the probability of Crocodile's defeat is basically certain. Warring States wrinkled his shield fur, and said angrily, damn Chris, he's a bastard for causing us such a big trouble. Xiaohei, I will let the Ghost Spider continue to kill Chris. I must not let him become the Chiwahai. The sea is not calm recently. If such a thing happens again, the sea will be completely messed up. Guo rubbed his forehead, and said with a tired face, at that time, I am afraid that the above will question the combat power of the Navy and may even rectify the Navy. Saved from the appearance of the Warring States period, Karp laughed, who made you want to be a marshal? You are doing it yourself, ha ha ha. Look at me, I'm just a lieutenant general. I drink tea and chat every day. How comfortable is my life? How about the Warring States period? Do you want to resign as a marshal and live a happy life with me? G. Pheasant watched Karp, said sleepily. It is Mr. Garp who is very powerful and knows how to enjoy life the most. Ha, I'm so sleepy, I'll talk about it after a while. Pulling down the blindfold, leaning on the chair to sleep soundly and ignoring Chris's affairs, Staff Officer Crane's eyes flashed with wisdom, and he supported his chin with both hands, and said slowly. Sengoku, you were right. In any case, the position of Shichibukai must not be replaced. I suggest that Lieutenant General Ghost Spider chase after him with all his strength. Be sure to take down the Chris pirates in one fell swoop before Crocodile is defeated. If you really can't catch up with Chris, and Crocodile is defeated again, then continue to hunt down and never let Chris go. Looking at the Warring States period, the old voice said, Chris is too dangerous, if you give him enough time, I am afraid that the ghost spider will be very difficult to take him down. Sengoku nodded and gave the order directly. Ghost spider, you go immediately, go after the Chris pirates with all your strength, be sure to take them down. Yes, the Warring States Marshal. Ghost Spider agreed without saying a word, hung up the phone quickly, left the office, and looked at the generals present, and said solemnly, now that Chris' strength is known, then his bounty must continue to increase. Let's discuss how much the reward will be offered. Huo Shaoshan took a breath, smiled, gentle, and expressed his opinion, since you have the strength of a lieutenant general, then the bounty should be at least 250 million Bailey. Doberman's face was resolute, and he said in a deep voice, he is a newcomer, how can he offer so many rewards? I suggest that a reward of 200 million is not enough. The deputy's appearance, so young and so powerful, there must be a big secret in him. I think the reward is still 280 million. This amount is more appropriate. Pulsolino tilted his head and said strangely, are young people now so scary? A newcomer who has just entered the Great Front Road, even offering a reward of more than 200 million Bailey, this is to scare people to death. Yohei still supports his chin with his hands, his eyes flash with wisdom, and he analyzes it in detail. Auntie T-Pig is right, Chris is so young the little devil, but his strength has reached this step, there must be secrets in his body. As of now, we still don't know whether he is a capable person or not, and whether he has other trump cards. Once one thing is certain, his talent must be amazing, otherwise it is absolutely impossible to reach this stage. Moreover, judging from various indications, this Chris had already formulated a series of plans before going to sea. Looking at the generals present, he said with a very serious expression, he has a very strong purpose, and he has aimed at 7 from the very beginning. The throne of Wuhai. On the way, he constantly recruits his subordinates, expands the team, and then quickly enters the Great Channel with a strong attitude. He has ambitions, knows forbearance, and has a very cold personality. He is really a troublesome young man. If I guess right, he is afraid possessing the 523 chi of Overlord Siba is very likely. So, I personally think that offering a reward of 300 million Bailey to Chris is the most appropriate reward. Hearing the words of He Shen's class, the conference room suddenly became quiet, and no one spoke aloud. Dao Minjensa looked at the table and secretly sighed, sister, he is really old-fashioned, and she really guessed it right by Chris alone. What he did, you can guess that he has a domineering look, which is really powerful. At this time, Pulsolino leaned on the chair, crossed Erlang's legs, and continued to die, it's really terrible. Of course, a reward of 300 million Bailey was offered. Momo looked at Staff Officer He, nodded, and agreed, thinking about it, Chris is afraid that he really has the spirit of a king. Only in this way can we explain why so many people followed him to burn the mountain and smoke a cigarette, then said with a gentle smile, how many years, such a terrifying young man has not appeared in the sea for a long time, this is really an anomaly. He patted the table, made the final decision, and said something in a deep voice. Although the reward is 300 million Bailey, it is indeed higher. However, given that Chris is too mysterious and has a strange identity, the bounty is set like this, and he will be offered a reward of 300 million. Anyway, this damn guy won't live long, let him be famous again. This is absolutely the last time. 134. Times are smiling, foo 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 tilde tilde. The new world, above a certain sea area. A new day has come, the sun is rising, the sun is shining on the whole sea, the blue sky and white clouds, the weather is very good Chris, I miss you so much. Hancock got up early in the morning, stood quietly in front of the window, his beautiful eyes looked at the rippling sea, the flawless danger, full of thoughts. A gust of breeze blew, gently brushing her black and beautiful hair, and the whole person exuded a charming light and charm. If there is a man here, I am afraid that it will be petrified in an instant. It is so beautiful and elegant. Chris, the concubine has become stronger and stronger, and the use of the 3-color domineering is more and more proficient. The next time we meet, the concubine promises to satisfy you and will not drag you back. Are you thinking about a concubine now? Well, it must be so. Hancock holds the beautiful and delicate eyelids and cheeks, his eyebrows are curved, and he is full of happiness. At this time, there was a knock on the door, and at the same time, the voice of Marie Goruder, "My sister, there is news from Chris Sama." Hearing this, Hancock's beautiful eyes lit up, he turned around quickly, and hurriedly said, "Come in and squeak." Marie Groud and Sandersonia walked in quickly. Hancock is impatient, beautiful eyes. Forgetting the newspaper in Dawsonia's hand, the pretty face was full of excitement and rushed to Purple and said something. "Quick, bring the newspaper to Igia." Sandersonia didn't hesitate, strode to Hancock, and handed the newspaper respectfully. Hancock took the newspaper without any hesitation, and hurriedly opened it when he saw the photo of Chris, his eyebrows curved into crescents. Like this, a charming smile burst out on the eyelids of the alluring country and the alluring city. So handsome, Chris is still so handsome. Concubine really likes to die. Chris, concubine misses you so much, please let concubine marry you. The concubine will definitely take good care of you and take good care of you. If you want to be a virtuous wife, what you ask your concubine to do will be done by your concubine. Chris, my concubine really misses you. Liang Dawsonia and Marigold looked at each other with a gratifying smile on their faces, very happy. If it was before, they would be helpless, they would smile bitterly, and they would feel very depressed. But now, seeing Hancock obsessed with Chris, they are very happy and overjoyed. Chris is really too strong. Now, it was the two of them that they had ever met. The strongest young people really admired Chris to the extreme. They admired him to the ground. If Hancock could become Chris' woman, the two of them would be very happy. Will not object. Sister, don't you read the newspaper? Marigold looked at Hancock and said with a slight smile, Master Chris has been offered a bounty again, and this time the bounty is very high. Chandasonia nodded, and said with admiration, Yes, Lord Chris is really amazing. Please take a look, Lord Sister. Of course. Hearing Sandersonia complimenting his sweetheart, Hancock raised his eyebrows and said very happily, Chris is the man I love, and he is the best. A man who is a concubine must be different. After finishing speaking, he carefully reads the newspaper. Marigold and Sandersonia nodded hurriedly, agreeing with each other. Chi-Chi said it was indigo, and my elder sister was right. At this moment, Hancock's beautiful eyes lit up, a look of surprise appeared on his pretty face, and he said happily, It's amazing, Chris actually offered a reward of 300 million Baileys. He has not yet entered the Great Waterway, and already has such a high reward, which is really amazing. As expected of the man that the concubine liked, he is indeed the strongest, the best. Marie Grodd smiled and agreed. Master Chris is indeed too powerful, this time it will definitely shock the world. Chandasonia nodded and said to Ruo, The last time I offered a reward of 100 million Bailey, I was shocked that the world is different this time. I believe that the whole new world will be shocked because of him. Hancock closed the newspaper. He got up, his eyes were firm, and he said loudly, Chris is getting stronger and stronger, and Igia can't fall behind. Go out. Igia has to practice hard and move towards Chris. When Igia follows Chris in the future, and wants to be his biggest assistant, no one can be stronger than Igia. Itum has to let Chris inform him that he is inseparable from Itum. Marie Goruder and Sandersonia nodded quickly, and said in unison, Okay. My elder sister quickly turned around and walked quickly to the door. Not daring to waste Hancock's time, the two came to the door, and couldn't help but discuss in a low voice. The elder sister is getting stronger and stronger, and her spirit is very good. Marie Gokud's face showed a look of rejoicing, and she said with great joy, My old sister, I have been wasting time, and I can't find the goal of life. I am smiling. It's different now, every day is full of fighting spirit, every day is full of confidence, and it's great to be straight. Sundar Zongania nodded and smiled dangerously. Shi Ming, my elder sister is really getting better and better, and she will no longer be as cold and arrogant as before. The former elder sister, although she looked cold, gave off a proud feeling. But in fact, my elder sister's heart is very empty, and she is not confident at all. But now everything has changed. My elder sister will not be afraid because of the past, and there will be no shadow. Not only that, but the unbearable past has become the driving force of the elder sister, constantly reminding the elder sister, and urging the elder sister to move forward. I am really happy about this change, my lord. Marie-Grade smiled and agreed. Not only are we happy, but so is Granny New. Every time she talks on the phone, the old man has a smile on her face. She feels that she is many years younger and has no pressure anymore. In fact, Granny New is the most aware of her elder sister's situation. She has always been worried about her elder sister. My elder sister, like us, can't forget the past at all. She has been living in fear, and sometimes wakes up in the middle of the night and never sleeps again. If it goes on like this for a long time and accumulates over time, I am afraid that my sister will go crazy, and my spirit will definitely go wrong. We are the same, there is no way to change it. Marigold opened the wooden door, walked in, and said with a smile, but don't worry about it now, everything is fine. Therefore, we would like to thank Lord Chris, because of his appearance, the shackles of the three of us have been untied, and the mind is no longer burdened. Now we can eat in a down-to-earth way, and when it is dawn at night, we will no longer be afraid, without the slightest pressure. Sandasonia sat on the chair, nodded, and said something with emotion. Yes, to Chris-sama, I am really grateful, I really want to say thank you to him in person. He has the grace of recreation for the three of us, and pulled us back from the gate of hell, so that we can become real people, not walking dead. Looking back on the past days, it's just unbearable to look back. Every day seems to be living in hell, alas. Sandasonia looked at Marigold and said with a smile, I'm really satisfied with Lord Chris, this brother-in-law is really great. Marigold nodded and smiled slightly, anyway, we don't know what love is, we just need to be happy for your elder sister. Didn't Granny New say that, if the elder sister can become Chris's woman, then it will definitely be a big happy event for Nine Snake Island. Everyone is supporting the elder sister, and I hope that she will marry Lord Chris. Lord Fuju is cultivating, we can't be behind Highlands. Young master, there is news from Chris again. Violet handed the newspaper to Doflamingo, with a gentle and dignified smile on his beautiful face, he looked extremely beautiful. Diamante looked at Violet and said with a smile, your figure is getting better and better, very attractive. Needless to say, she is a dancer, a person who specializes in dancing, can you be in bad shape? Jorah touched her cheeks and laughed loudly. When this young lady was young, she was in such a good shape. Violet looked at her, smiled and said, you are very young now, you are not old at all, I hate it, Violet, how can you praise people like this, I hate it to death. Jorah held her cheeks and twisted. After twisting his fat body, he said with a smile on his face. Torapal leaned in front of Doflamingo, sniffed, and quickly said, I said Dover, what was said in the newspaper, yes it's not that Chris is making a big deal again, he tilde. Piku leaned back in the chair, her voice as sharp as always said, this Chris is really noisy, and reports about him at every turn. Dover, is it really appropriate to work with such a kid? I always feel that he is too tossed, I am afraid that one day he will kill himself. Gradius put his arms around him and said indifferently, this guy is really too arrogant, young and arrogant, maybe he will be killed by the Navy before he enters the New World. At this time, Doflamingo was leaning on the chair, with Erlang's legs crossed, and couldn't help laughing. He was smiling like a crazy model, foo. Throwing the newspaper aside, a member of the Waruo family said with a smile that Chris had offered a reward of 300 million Baileys and successfully detonated the entire sea. This is a big thing. Make trouble, the more troublesome the better, let the sea boil completely, so that the Navy will have a headache, FFU. Everyone who hasn't read the newspaper, Chi-Chi was shocked by Doflamingo's words to the tune of 100 million. What a horrible bounty, how is this possible? It's incredible. You know, Doflamingo's bounty is only 340 million berries. The gap between the two is only a little bit left. If Chris makes a fuss again, so much Flamenco's bounty will definitely be surpassed. There is no doubt about this. This makes people, how can they not be shocked? 135. What are you afraid of? I have a white beard, ooh tilde. Jorah's face was shocked, and she looked like she had seen a ghost, and said in disbelief, how is this possible? Chris, how did he do it? Torapal took a breath and said habitually, I said, the newspaper might make a mistake, it's impossible. It's really a bounty of 300 million, it's terrifying. Gradius picked up the newspaper, glanced at the reward amount, his eyes widened, his face full of horror. Dia Ida frowned, stunned, and said that this kid is really worrying, and his strength is too strong, to be able to achieve this. Pika's voice, as always, unpleasant and harsh, said, it's really incredible to be able to stir up such a big storm without entering the Great Waterway. Actually, if you think about it, that's pretty good. Let him fight with the Navy and see if he can rush into the New World under the siege of the Navy. Rauji nodded and agreed. If he can enter the New World, then the sea will definitely be very lively. Gigi listened to their conversation. Violet was very happy in his heart, and secretly muttered that Lord Chris really is the strongest, who has created the highest record in history, has never been able to achieve this step, it is really too powerful. HMPH, Doflamingo, 680, just wait, within 2 years, your death will come. At that time, I must kill you to avenge the people and my mother. Then, she turned. Consider her relationship with Chris. Chris is so good and so powerful. It is not unacceptable to be his woman. It seems that in the future, I will often contact Chris, chat with him, and talk about some emotional issues. Making him my man is actually because I have made a lot of money. Chris, who has nothing to be wronged, don't try to reject me. You are destined to be my man in this life, and no one can take you away. Deswindo's Rosa, Flower Fields. In a certain room, there were 2 people at this time, it was King Riku and Rebecca. Grandpa, look, Lord Chris is in the newspaper. When Jung Becca saw the contents of the newspaper, her beauty lit up, and on her beautiful and refined eyelids, she showed a look of incomparable surprise, and said quickly. Oops. Grandpa, Lord Chris has been offered a reward. A reward of 300 million Bailey. King Liku was shocked. The old face was full of shock, completely frightened. Rebecca, what did you just say? Lord Chris has been offered a reward of 300 million Baileys, how is this possible? Rebecca nodded, and hurriedly handed the newspaper to King Liku. Her beautiful eyes rolled around, and she said with a sweet smile, Grandpa, I don't believe you, is this 300 million yuan? King Liku didn't say a word, just looked down. The old face was full of shock, and he muttered that it was really 300 million, this is too incredible. Lord Reese is indeed the strongest, to be able to create such a record is amazing. But that's fine. The stronger and influential he is, the better it will be for us to help us. King Liku looked at the newspaper and said with a smile on his face, this young man is really outstanding. Haven't seen anything better than him. If he can become my son-in-law, then I'm afraid I'll wake up laughing when I dream. Ha ha ha. Schwabeka looked at him, winked at him, smiled and said, Grandpa, you don't have to dream, didn't my aunt say it? She will contact Chris, and then pursue his aunt who is so powerful, and so beautiful and dignified. Chris will definitely agree. At that time, I will have an uncle, and you will have a son-in-law. He. Liku Wang waved his hand and said with a slight smile, although your aunt said so, she doesn't really want to pursue Chris. She can see through a man's heart and is very disgusted with men, you know that. So I want her to marry Lord Chris. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to talk about it. King Liku looked at Rebecca and sighed, it's a pity that you are too young to talk about marriage yet. Level. Otherwise, it will be very safe to betroth you to Lord Chris. Becca rolled his eyes at him, groaned, and said something. Grandfather, what are you talking about? I'm still young, don't treat me. Let's talk about betrothal to others. Although Lord Chris is very strong, he is very good. But I have nothing but admiration for him, nothing else at all. So, Grandpa, don't mess with the mandarin ducks. Nebeka snorted and said angrily, Grandpa, you are annoying me, so you want to send me out, isn't that so? King Liku laughed and was amused by her. Grandpa is just joking, just ignore it. Now let's see if your aunt can succeed. I hope she will work harder and catch up with Lord Chris, ha ha ha. Moby Dick, above deck. Incredible, Marco looked at the newspaper and said with emotion, that kid Chris, who is in the newspaper again. Sachi smiled, gentle, what's the matter, did Chris make any big noise again? Fosa leaned over to Marco, and when he read the newspaper, he was taken aback. How is this possible? 300 million Bailey, the reward is so high. Hearing this, everyone was shocked, and quickly turned around to look over. All of them seemed unbelievable. Vista looked at Fosa and asked in disbelief, you're not mistaken, it's really 300 million Baileys. No, he is a newcomer who has not yet entered the Great Channel, and the reward of 100 million is enough. How can it reach 300 million? Jingu Duo quickly said something too. Brahmank shrugged and said casually, I don't believe it anyway, it's impossible. Marco looked away from the newspaper, looked at them, narrowed his eyes slightly, and said lazily about you heard right, Chris, this kid, is offering a reward of 300 million Bailey. At this time, Whitebeard, who was sitting on the throne, said in a deep voice, Marco, bring the newspaper, I would like to see, what is this kid doing? Joes doesn't talk much, so it's rare to say, Dad seems to be very interested in this kid Chris, and always asks about his allegiance. Lakyo nodded and said with a smile, it's rare to meet such an interesting young man, it's understandable that Dad would pay more attention to it. But this Chris really has a set. Harda smiled and praised, saying that Dad said that he has a lot of potential, which is completely correct, really powerful. Yi Zhang wiped the flintlock gun, and said lightly, Dad's eyes have always been vicious, so it's impossible to read it wrong. At this time, Marco had already sent the newspaper to Whitebeard, only to hear Whitebeard laugh and say in a loud voice that Chris, the kid, is getting better and better. The sea has been calm for so long, and finally it is about to start to boil. Lysia, wearing a pink nurse uniform, stroked her pale blonde hair, and gently persuaded, Captain, you must not get excited. Woolen cloth. Jaerkson, who has black and beautiful hair, nodded and continued, indeed, Captain, your parenting needs to be more stable, not ups and downs. Whitebeard raised his head and laughed loudly. He was very smart. He directly said that you were worried too much, and that my health was not that bad. You know, Lao Su is a Whitebeard, boo lao laula. New World, an island off the beaten path. It's incredible, Chris, this young man, is in the newspaper again. Baker took a breath, read the newspaper, and said calmly, and this time, the bounty has been raised to 300 million Baileys. This young man is really scary. When they heard Beckman say this, they all looked over with surprise on their faces. Lajaloo stopped to eat, his eyes widened, he looked at Beckman, and asked in disbelief, you read that right, how is this possible? Yeah, it's not 30 million, it's 300 million Baileys. Jesus Cloth nodded, couldn't believe it and said that Rockstar glanced at the newspaper and said in shock, it's really 300 million Baileys, there's no mistake, how is this possible, Chris, this little devil, what did he do? Arrived. Shanks held a big rock, laughed loudly, and said something strange, this young man is indeed very unusual, he is a strong man, ha ha ha. Beckman put down the newspaper and exhaled the smoke from his mouth. Kai Yan flashed in his eyes, and analyzed. If I guess correctly, this young man must have a domineering look, which is why the Navy will give such a high reward. A young man with potential, without this ability, the Navy would definitely not be able to offer a price of 300 million. After all, everyone knows how stingy the Navy is. Lackey ate the food all the way and said with a smile, I am looking forward to it. I really want to meet him now and see what's so special about this young man. Jesus B.U. nodded and continued. Speaking of such a powerful young man, this is the first time I have met Roxta, shrugging his shoulders and saying something casually. Although I don't believe that he has a domineering look, but since the deputy captain said so 1.0, then he must have such a powerful ability. Shanks waved his hand and said boldly, "You don't have to look forward to it. I believe it won't be long before he will definitely enter the new world. Of course, if he's not a strong man, then I don't say it, ha ha ha." This time, Chris Bounty has directly blocked the whole sea. Not only the world is discussing him, but also in every corner of the Great Road. The merchants and pirates all talked about it was too scary. The last time a reward of 100 million burleys was offered, this time it floated directly to 300 million. It was really scary. When did such a terrifying young man appear in the sea? It's unbelievable, isn't the Navy all eat shit? A mere rookie actually offered a reward of 300 million Bailey. The Chris pirates of the Grass Mud Horse have a way to enter the new world, and see if I don't destroy you. Another supernova wants to. It was born, and a new era seems to be coming. After many years, the sea has begun to surge again. The flag bearer of the new era, I am afraid that it is the young man Chris, the pusher of the era. It is really you. 136. Whispering Fruit Abilities, Abyss officially debuts. Chris, above deck. Abyss, I'm a master of Junyu, you can't compare to me. He Padong sat on the railing, turned his head to look at the little loli next to him, looked very proud, and said something with a smile. Babo nodded and said in agreement, "You are really good at fishing, you are so talented." Abyss sat on the chair, shook her little feet, blinked her big eyes, and said with a sweet voice, "You are really good. So strong. However, I don't have much time to fish, so I have to practice with Lord Chris." Abyss tilted her little head and said with her little finger, "Recently, Lord Chris taught me to practice swords, and also taught me to develop whisper fruits." "Oh, yes, I still have to run. Good man, where can I spend time fishing?" It turns out that yesterday, when the Chris was moving forward, it ran into Abyss. Needless to say, she will definitely become a member of the boat. The Sweetheart Queen and Karina will join the Chris pirates under the influence of Baccarat's lucky fruit. Abyss, speaking of your evil man fruit, it's really powerful. Padong turned his head to the little black dog in the corner, and saw that his eyes were cold, and he was madly biting a fish there. Breath. This guy is so evil, you can hear his heart, it's really incredible. Babo looked at Abyss and asked curiously, "Abyss, what is this little black dog thinking at this moment?" Abyss looked at the little black dog, pricked up her ears, activated the whispering fruit ability, and listened to it. Sounds so scary. Abyss shook her little head, released the fruit, SO63 ability, and said with some fear, "Every time it says, it wants to kill everyone, and will not let anyone go. I don't want to listen to it anymore. I don't want to hear its voice in the future, it's too scary. I don't want to be friends with it, it's so annoying." At this moment, Bashes glanced at Abyss, shrugged his shoulders, and said helplessly, "The captain really accepts such a child, it's a fart." Gao Q was lying on the bridge, smiling strangely and said, "Don't you know that the captain likes women, especially little loli, Harui?" Ah Jin brandished the two strangely shaped weapons, practiced hard, and said coldly, "Who said that Abyss is useless, but she is someone with the ability to whisper fruit, and she will definitely play a big role in the future." Luo carried the demon knife and cried, nodded, and continued, "Yes, it is indeed worth training. Lafayette just bought a newspaper, smiled slightly, very gentleman, the newspaper came out, and the captain really went up to the total bounty ratio. I thought it was much higher, and it has soared to 300 million. It's really amazing." When I heard Lafitte's words, everyone stopped cultivating, turned their heads and looked at their faces, all filled with disbelief. "Look." Cavendish opened his eyes wide and hurriedly said, "Impossible, if the reward reaches 250 million, it's already sky high, where can it reach 300 million? As expected of the captain, he is indeed the strongest." Hawkins was playing cards, and he said in a lifeless voice. Bassos looked at the newspaper, raised his arms, and laughed. Captain is trying to scare people to death. Way ha 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 ha. Luo habitually pushed his glasses. Calm down. The sub-jig said. In the past, the Ministry of Shao has never been in command, and the Navy has no idea of the captain's combat effectiveness. This time, he killed the colonel of the headquarters with one move. Judging from his strength, he was at least at the level of a lieutenant general, so there was such a high bounty. However, this amount did exceed my estimate. It actually exceeded 300 million. Jin was shocked when he looked at the newspaper. His expression was as indifferent as ever, and he said that the captain had made a move, so the bounty skyrocketed. And we didn't do anything, and the bounty didn't change at all. The combined bounty of our pirate group is more than 600 million. Even if it is placed in the New World, it is still a giant. There is no doubt that Luo Wei squinted his eyes. Still so coldly said, the captain's bounty is almost catching up with Brother Doflamingo. If I remember correctly, that guy's bounty is 340 million. Bailey Lafitte ignored them. He took the newspaper directly and walked quickly to the training room. Lafitte put the newspaper on the table and walked out of the training room. He didn't dare to stay in it for a long time. Hurry up and see how much reward Chris offered. Karina hurriedly sat up straight, her beautiful eyes flowing, showing a sly color, and her pretty face was full of excitement. The sweetheart queen stroked her pale blonde hair, smiled and said, "Let's guess, Chris will be rewarded a lot. I think, there are still 230 million. Betty took a breath, still so calm, she used a sentence directly, it would not exceed 250 million anyway. Wan Nami blinked her eyes, smiled pure and sweet, and said carelessly, I think, 200 million is already the most. You know, we haven't entered the Great Waterway yet, and we are still in the East China Sea. In this weakest sea area, 100 million is already terrifying, let alone 200 million. Nuauchi nodded high and smiled sweetly. Yes, Chris gave me a bounty of 100 million Baileys, and I was shocked. Now I am offering a bounty of 200 million, which is enough. I really can't improve it any more, or it will scare people to death. Leaning on the chair, with Erlang's legs crossed, she was elegant and generous, and Mei said very much, if this is the case, I'm afraid you will be scared to death. Look at Chris' bounty, 300 million Bailey. Hearing Alrita's words, everyone was stunned, even though they knew Chris very well. They couldn't believe the bounty. Gold Machi's eyes widened, her pretty face was full of surprise, and she muttered. He said, I didn't look at molybdenum, how could it be so high? The door quickly turned his head over, and when he saw the amount on the newspaper, he was shocked and said that it was really 300 million, that's right. This is too scary, how is it possible? Ju crossed Erlang's legs, looked at the man in front, and said with a gentle smile, Chris, your bounty has come out, 300 million Baileys. Chris was doing a handstand without raising his head. He was as calm as always. I know what I said, can you look surprised? Karina saw that Chris was so calm, she couldn't help but complained and said something. This is 300 million, don't you have any ideas, why don't you get excited? Woolen cloth. He is just a robot. If he has any feelings, he only knows how to cultivate. Baccarat waved his hand and said with a smile, I can't say that. The main reason is that he is really not interested in this piece. Let's not say 300 million, it's 3 billion, and Nami, who he doesn't care about, looked at Baccarat with a puzzled look on her pretty face, and hurriedly asked, Sister Baccarat, is there a reward of 3 billion for the sea? Sayanana floated in the air and said with a smile, I know. Didn't Chris say it, let alone 3 billion, that is, the bounty of 5 billion, all exist. The white beard, the first of the four, will offer a reward of more than 5 billion. Kia blinked her beautiful eyes, her pretty face showed emotion, and she said softly, it's too strong, Lord Chris is really amazing. Najiu touched her delicate and white chin, and said gracefully, I've already become so famous before I entered the Great Waterway. If it gets in, it won't overturn the ocean. I think, this time Chris's name must have spread all over the world, and everyone will remember the smoke from Betty's mouth. I said, isn't this very good? The more people know about Chris, the more influence of Chris will increase. There will definitely be more and more new people joining our team. You must know that it is not an easy thing to attack a non-government country in the New World countries, all very powerful. Because they are too confident in their own strength, they do not need to be protected by the world government at all, and they can still establish a foothold in the New World. It can be seen how powerful the combat power of these countries is. Baccarat folded her crimson hair. Ying smiled and said, that's why we have been gathering our subordinates and recruiting potential newcomers. Because in the New World, there is a fierce battle waiting for us. The girls nodded in unison and agreed with what Baccarat said. Then, they had nothing to do, so they continued to chat around Chris's bounty. Get up guys, the above is a picture of Abyss. This one is from the anime, everyone knows it, so the author won't introduce it too much. About her, it will have a big role in the future. I will bury it here first, and it will come in handy later. 137. Report. Ahead is the Red Earth continent, here we are. One day later. Chris, in the training room. Lord Chris, I've swung my sword 50 times, and I've completed the mission. Abyss wiped the sweat from her forehead, looked at Ruo Chris with wide eyes, and said in a sweet voice, Lord Chris, I want to go out and find Papa Thump them. Chris brandished the blood-red sword, as calm as always, go to Abyss, nodding her head, then kicking and jumping, making a silver bell shell laughter, and walking towards the door. Desire was sitting on the deck with black cloth tied around her eyes, her head turned to the right, and with a thud, the small wooden stick hit her on the head lightly. Desire offered a helping hand, and on the dangerously beautiful and fair-skinned side, showing a sluggish state, he smiled wryly and said, Makino, let me rest first, I'm a little tired. Karina stood by and swung her sword. May blinked, showing a sly look. She smiled and said a word before cultivating for a while, it's too fast. Come, let's continue the practice, don't rest. Perona floated in the air, drinking a drink, and said with a smile, you think everyone is Chris, how can you be so diligent? Anyway, after cultivating for a while, I have to stop and rest. It's really boring. Nuauchi held the barbell high and said with a slight smile, there is not a single one of us who practice hard, and our mental state is not very good. Yarli stood the big iron rod in front of her, akimbo on her hips, dripping sweat on the danger of the whole country and city, but she was still so gentle and generous, beautiful and fascinated. It can't be said that we don't work hard. I feel that everyone is working hard. Of course, compared with Chris and the others, our training time is definitely not enough. However, as a woman, it is impossible to compare with men in this area, so we are almost done. Carmen nodded and agreed. When everyone eats the evil fruit later, their strength will improve. I'm not afraid. Queen Sweetheart was wearing fist food and sandbags, and retorted, didn't Chris say it, don't be too fond of devil fruits. The world's top powerhouses are very powerful in physical skills, at least 2 color domineering, this is a prerequisite. Although we can't become the strongest group of people, we must learn to see the domineering and armed domineering. Betty leaned on the chair, took a breath, and said calmly as always, the overlord is domineering, we can't cultivate if we don't have it. But 2 color domineering, everyone really has to learn. If you eat the evil fruit in the future, you will get twice the result with half the effort. Needy brushed her pale blonde hair, sweating on her smooth forehead, took a deep breath, and said something with a sweet smile. With Chris as a strong man, as long as you don't be too lazy, then learning to be domineering is just a matter of time. Jume rubbed her forehead, a look of helplessness on her pretty face, and said with a wry smile, I feel that my talent is too difficult to find aura, and if I want to learn to be domineering in 2 colors, I don't know that I have to wait until the year of the monkey and the month of the horse, Ale. Ju sat on the chair, with her legs crossed. Mei looked at Baccarat, and said with a gentle smile, it's still your most severe palace, and the speed of cultivation is terrifyingly fast. Stopped reading, a sweet and lovely smile bloomed on her pretty face, Sister Baccarat is the goddess of luck. Whatever you do, everything will go smoothly. For Sister Baccarat, I really admire it. It's amazing. Baccarat pulled up her crimson hair and said with a sweet smile, "Don't envy me, everyone has their own advantages, so why belittle yourself?" Woolen cloth. Don't worry, Chris is very stubborn about cultivating domineering. He will definitely teach everyone. Let us all succeed at this time. There is a report outside. Discover the red soil continent. We are going to enter the Great Waterway. It was found that the red clay voice was very loud and hysterical, and it spread throughout the ship. It can be seen how excited the alarm officer is, and he definitely used all his strength. There is no doubt about this. Not only did the girls stop practicing, even Chris rarely stopped. Chris has always been decisive and said a sentence. After that, the girls who were cultivating walked to the door, and quickly got busy. Some wiped sweat, some put things. Nami was the most excited, wiped her jade hands with a towel, and said carelessly, "Finally, we are about to enter the Great Waterway. It's a big happy event, haha." Sweetheart shook her head, her flawless face was full of emotion. She sighed, and said that after sailing on the sea for so long, we have finally come to this point. It is not easy. Betty glanced at her sideways, and said calmly as always, "You joined later than me, and if you want to express emotion, I must be more than you." But speaking of it, the elder sister Baccarat was the first to join the team. At that time, she was the only woman. Now you see, there are a lot of women, too many to count. Alrita carried the big iron rod, smiled and said, "What's so strange?" To use Fan Yiyuka's motto, "This is destiny." Makino nodded lightly, eyebrows curled. "It's very gentle, isn't it? It's fate to be able to meet Chris and everyone. I heard from Miss Baccarat that Chris fell from the sky that day." Karina squinted her beautiful eyes with admiration on her pretty face, and said something. Asking for flowers. Zero then go to see, quickly pull up a group of people, keep expanding the team, and think about it until now. Chris has already looked for the direction before going to sea, and knows that the most important part is to find Baccarat big sister. Rona floated in the air and said with a smile, "It goes without saying that everyone knows how important Sister Baccarat is to this ship." Meidi took elegant steps and smiled sweetly, "Let's go out quickly, I really want to see what the Red Earth continent looks like." I'd love to see it too, it must be pretty amazing." Kia nodded her head and smiled sweetly. Then, the girls chatted and laughed, made clear voices, and slowly walked towards the deck outside. Basas stood up, raised his arms high, and with a mad look on his face, he shouted, "My mother, it has been sailing for so many days since the beginning of the South China Sea. Laosu is finally going to enter the Great Waterway today. Wei ha 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 Gao Q right at them. The smile is still so difficult. Speaking of which, you are all newcomers, and Bashes and I are the oldest crew members." Ajin glanced at him coldly, and said without a net, "You forgot the rules of the boat, the strong are respected. This ship, it doesn't matter if it comes first or later, it doesn't matter how early you come." Playing emotional cards, there is no arrogance in nodding, Gao Leng said, "This is undoubtedly the best. No need to consider the qualifications of the crew, and it doesn't matter whether it is an old man or a newcomer. Anyway, everything is based on strength. Don't worry about anyone's face." Hawkins was still dead and agreed, saying, "This point, the captain has long been foresight, so he has avoided a lot of trouble." Crow pushed his glasses habitually, looked very rational, and said, "It's dangerous here, but it shouldn't be taken lightly. Many pirates collided with the mainland of Hongxi before they entered the Great Waterway, and the ship was destroyed. They stopped here." Lafitte turned his cane and smiled. The gentleman said, "You are talking about others, as for what we want, it's easy to get in. With Baccarat, we must be lucky and there will be no danger. The most important thing is that the captain is strong, and there will be no problems." Bartolomeo was at the top of the Red Earth continent, only to see the dark clouds covering it, and he couldn't help but shook his head and said with emotion, "This is too high, it's really incredible." 138. Vientiane Tinian, attract the barrier fruit. At this moment, there was a sound of footsteps, and I saw Chris leading the girls, talking and laughing, and came over here. Karina raised her head and looked at the red clay follower in front of her, showing the color of amazement. This is the mainland of Hongxi, and it really is all red, which is really strange. Nami held her little hand. With a determined look on her face, she said loudly, "For the nautical land, this is a place that must be conquered, and I will definitely be able to do it." Nuo Qigao patted her shoulder and smiled. "No problem, Jung Mei, you can definitely be amazed by Alrita," and said with admiration, "There is no end in sight, and the height is completely blocked by dark clouds. At least thousands of meters, it's terrible." Carmen nodded, shrugged his shoulders, smiled bitterly, and said that the most important thing is that we have to climb up and rush to the top, and then we will fall down. When I heard Chris say that, I still can't believe it, but now I really understand it. So at this moment, Bassos looked at Chris, laughed and said, "Captain, are you going to enter the Great Waterway? So I'm too excited and don't want to practice." Span. Poison Q rarely did not die, with a serious look on his old face. This moment is incomparably sacred and worth remembering by everyone. Ah Jin nodded, rarely agreeing with Poison Q, and continued, "I believe that many years from now, we will still remember it clearly when we look back on it today." A word, today is a day worth remembering. Chloe pushed his glasses with the palm of his hand, and said rationally, "The entire Great Channel will become tighter because of our arrival. Chris Pirates. E will give everyone a perfect transcript." Lafayette looked at him and said politely, "You said it so profoundly, but it's true, this regiment is so strong. Once it enters the Great Waterway, who can stop us? Absolutely does not exist." Cavendish smiled and said, "I seem to hear Chihuahai's call. Xiaocheng is about to achieve his goal. I have to say, after the last blow, he has already shrunk a lot, not so much. The title of narcissistic young master has completely disappeared and will never appear again. He is very pragmatic now. He is working hard to cultivate and become stronger. He doesn't have to deal with the rapid currents ahead. Everyone pays attention." Nami stood by the railing, looking at the red soil continent that was getting closer and closer, and hurriedly said, 12, "Let's take this ocean current and rush directly into the Great Waterway. Everyone, quickly grab the solid things, so as not to be caught. Throw it out." And sure enough, as soon as Nami's voice faded, there was the sound of rushing waves in front of them. Nuo Qigao quickly said, "Otsuka listens to Nami's advice and takes protective measures, so it's safer." The girls nodded in unison, and didn't say much. They quickly grabbed the more secure things and didn't dare to take the slightest bit. Luo held the demon knife and cried, and said coldly as always, "With such a fast flow rate, the ship can't steer at all, and this is the reason why many newcomer ships are destroyed. In the face of nature, the power of human beings has always been weak," and Hawkins said in a low voice. Suddenly, the hull of the ship shook heavily, rocked up and down, and was sucked by a strong attraction, and the speed was amazingly fast, like an arrow from the string. It looked very scary. Just rushing into the Great Waterway like this, Wei ha 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 Bashes is not afraid at all. With an excited look on his face, he laughed, his voice shook, Ajin frowned, and said solemnly, "The attraction of ocean currents, it's really too strong, like a flood of beasts, it wants to incense us." Crow looked straight ahead and said lightly, "It's there, that crack is the entrance, and we'll go in and rise from it later. It's really incredible. The sea is so magical, there are so many incredible things, it is very shocking." At this time, there was a sound of honor from the observation deck. A wooden box was found on the right. Hearing what the alarm officer said, everyone looked over in unison. On the edge of the red soil continent, there was a black wooden box, which was undulating up and down with the waves. Nami looked at the black box a few hundred meters away, frowned, and said quickly, "Let's leave that box alone." Arrived. Now that the current is so fast, if the rudder is forcibly turned, it will definitely be pulled to the red soil continent, and it will be over. Karina grabbed the bar and said, "That's right, let's forget about the rest and rush into the slit with peace of mind, this is the most important thing." Carmen snorted, and said speechlessly, "The situation is so critical, where can I manage other things and just ignore it?" All the girls nodded and agreed. At this time, Baccarat looked at the stalwart figure, took it easy, smiled and said, "Chris, I feel good luck is here." Hearing what Baccarat said, everyone quickly turned to look at Chris, waiting for him to make a decision. "Captain, the speed of the current is too fast. If you change the direction, I am afraid it will be very dangerous." As the deputy captain, he has the most right to speak among these people, so he quickly persuaded. Crow frowned, his eyes flashed with wisdom, and he said quickly, "It's almost the entrance now, if you go to pick up that black box. Then the ship is pushed by the rapids, and it will inevitably hit the red soil continent, and the consequences will be disastrous." Bassos looked at the black box not far away, scolded Cheoming, and said something special, "Such a critical moment, there is something good, what kind of thing is this?" "Captain, this is good luck, let's not do it, safety is the first, don't worry about the black box." Akin looked at Chris and said with admiration, "Don't underestimate the captain, I believe the captain must have a way to solve the little black dog." Silently squatting on the side, looking at Chris with cold eyes, full of killing intent, he also wanted to write, what would Chris do? Chris turned slightly, raised his right hand, and there was a white swirl in his palm. The black box broke away from the sea and gradually rose, like an arrow from a string, and flew towards Chris quickly with a kind of squinting sight. Feel. Seeing this scene, everyone was shocked. Staying in that black box, I can't react at all. The wooden box fell to the deck with a crisp sound, which woke everyone up, and then came back to their senses. Then, thunderous applause broke out, and they all sent flowers and praised Captain Chris. Long live. Too strong, the captain is really the strongest, ha ha ha. Whoa whoa whoa. Vientiane Tianian, it's really amazing. I'm so excited, I'm about to cry, woo woo woo. Captain, please don't leave me, my brother will follow you for the rest of my life, la la la. The little black dog looked at Chris with a look of horror in his eyes, and was really afraid of this young man. It's too strong, it's really terrible, you must not mess around in the future, or you will be strangled to death. At this moment, Cavendish's personality and fear of Chris really reached the highest point, and he no longer dared to have the idea of resistance. Sir, your move is too powerful, isn't it? Bassos was the most direct. Looking at Chris, he hurriedly asked Vientiane Tianian, Captain, didn't you eat the fruit of rejection? How can you still attract things? No, I can't understand it at all. Poison Q frowned and smiled hard to say, it's so strong, it's even more impossible to start the captain's battle now. With a faint smile, he said with great admiration, the captain has never disappointed anyone, I knew it would be the result. Sui cried with the demon sword on his back, followed by praise and said that although I knew the captain was very strong, I was really shocked to be able to use such abilities. When it was too powerful, the boat had already come to the entrance and was pulled by the current, heading towards the sky without moving forward. It looked like the ship was climbing a hill. It looked very weird and unbelievable, but for this scene, everyone was not interested at all, and they were still discussing Chris's feat of Cavendish just now. Looking at Chris, he was puzzled and asked directly, Xiao Chong, can you explain what this Vientiane heavenly enchantment is? This must be the ability of the devil fruit, but why is it not repelling, but attracting? Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly, and said, Xiao Chong, everyone is very curious, can you explain it? I know, this must be your trump card, and it will not be used under normal circumstances. If it weren't for a special situation this time, you would definitely continue to retain your strength. Others who wouldn't use this trick didn't say anything. They all looked at Chris with a hopeful look in their eyes. They really wanted to know the answer. Chris wrapped his arms around him, calm as always, and repeated what he said to Hancock. It seems that he has just entered the Great Channel, and Chris is in a good mood, otherwise he would be too lazy to explain anything, let alone let him repeat what he said before. Hearing Chris's answer, everyone was really shocked. They never thought that the development of the fruit of evil can actually achieve this step. It's really scary. When Chris was practicing, he basically practiced swords and the like. I didn't expect that it would be terrifying to develop such a skill. Queen Sweetheart shook her head, her pretty face was full of emotion, and she really admired Chris. Betty shrugged her shoulders, exhaled the smoke in her mouth, and said lightly, "This guy is always mysterious. How can we know so much? It doesn't taste like it, but Chris is fantastic with it." Karina's beautiful eyes flowed, and she smiled and praised the development of the devil fruit. "I believe that Chris must be the number one in the world, and no one is more powerful than him." Corona floated in the air, nodded repeatedly, and echoed, that is, the person I admire the most is Chris, hamming Haley. Arita carried the big Tiwu and said with a smile, "If you are not strong, how can you be our captain?" At this moment, Bashes laughed, "I don't know what to say. Anyway, the stronger the captain, the happier I will be, way ha 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 ha." There is no doubt that the captain's development of fruits is truly unparalleled. Hawkins's voice was low, and he must have said something. Cavendish shook his head and said in awe, "Although I don't care much about devil fruits, it's really admirable for the captain to be able to do this." Positive repelling, reverse attracting, it is easy to say, but if you want to do this, you can't just talk about it without sufficient understanding of the development of evil fruits. It is definitely impossible to do this. From this, it can be seen that the captain has completely comprehended the fruit of rejection, and there is no problem. Lafitte adjusted the whole gift and said with a slight smile, "Not necessarily. After all, the fruit is evil, but there is a higher level of utilization. Wake up. Animal-type abilities can awaken, and superhuman-type abilities are the same. They eat superhuman-type fruits. Whether they have developed to the level of awakening is still a question." At this time, Bartolomeo opened the box and looked surprised. Yelled up, "Captain, it's a devil fruit. Great, ha ha ha." Hearing this, everyone hurriedly looked over. I saw Bartolomeo holding a whole white, apple-shaped evil fruit in his hand. Under the sunlight, it shone with a faint white light. It looks beautiful, especially eye-catching. White evil mania fruit, but also apple-shaped. The sweetheart queen touched her delicate chin and said in a very positive tone, "No surprise, this one must be superhuman." Betty's relationship with Queen Sweetheart is the best. She glanced at her sideways, and said angrily, "Whoever told you that the apple-shaped one is superhuman? Regarding the shape of the devil fruit, it is not absolute at all what type it corresponds to. Apple-shaped, it may also be a natural 863 series. It is not impossible that Leju stroked her hair, put Baccarat on the right, smiled and said, "This fruit is a bit charming, I forgot what it is called, can you remember?" Baccarat nodded lightly, generously and decently, "Don't say it, I do know this fruit. This is the superhuman barrier fruit. After eating it, the capable person can use a selected barrier to defend an attack. Overall, this devil fruit is still very powerful." Karina's beautiful eyes lit up, a sweet smile bloomed on her pretty face, she nodded repeatedly, and said, "I also remembered, it is indeed a fruit of the screen. The copyright of the novel resources belongs to the original author, and the text is only for personal study and discussion. Trial reading, please delete it within 24 hours after downloading, please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy." This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel internal group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. This fruit of evil is mainly used for defense, and its defense is so strong that it can hardly be broken. Mei Gang looked at them, Ying smiled, and said happily, "No matter what, it's a good thing anyway. I heard Ba when Carla said this." Bartolomeo immediately looked at Chris with excitement, with a look of excitement on his face like a ghost, and hurriedly pleaded and said quickly, "Chong, this evil nightmare fruit, give it to me. I don't know what's going on, but I always feel that somewhere, this devil fruit appeared for me. Of course, this should be my illusion, ha ha ha. Desire knew him best, and when he heard this, he became angry and immediately became angry. Speak straight if you like, why do you need to be around the corner? What does it mean to appear for you in the dark, Bartolomeo? You think too much. Carmen nodded and said with a disdainful smile, yes, that's not how we look for excuses, when we are so gelding. Bassos shrugged his shoulders and said with a smile, it has nothing to do with Lao Tzu anyway, it's okay to give it to anyone. Lafitte looked at the incompetents and smiled slightly, still so gentle, you four, let's figure it out, the captain will definitely not care about it. Not interested. Cavendish seems to have a natural repulsion to the fruit of evil and honesty, and does not want to eat the fruit of evil and honesty at all. Agent shook his head and said indifferently, I'm taking the attack route, and the defensive type devil fruit is not suitable for me. Habitually pushed his glasses and said to Shu, if you don't like it, then give it to Bartolomeo. Anyway, he valued it so much, and it fulfilled his wishes. Hearing that several competitors had all withdrawn, Bartolomeo immediately smiled and was very happy. However, he still looked at Chris and said with great respect, Long, I have chosen this devil fruit, and I hope you can agree to it. Chris still put his arms around him, spit out a word, thank you, Captain. With an ecstatic look on Bartolomeo's face, he thanked Chris and said, Captain, you are so great to me, and I will remember your kindness for the rest of my life. After that, without the slightest hesitation, he directly sent the fruit to chew on and took a bite. 139. Captain, at such an exciting time, please give a speech. The sweetheart queen stroked her pale blonde hair and said with a smile, every time I see someone eating a devil fruit, I feel very interesting. Betty spit out the smoke from her mouth and said lightly, with his pale face, the old lady couldn't help but think of bad memories. The taste of the evil fruit is really hard to forget. Arita carried the big iron rod and said with a smile. At this time, Bartolomeo pulled the grass-green hair, and said in a dangerous manner, what the hell, devil fruits are really not edible for humans, ***. Zaya looked at him and scrutinized it carefully. With a look of doubt in her beautiful eyes, she asked Ptolemy, why do I feel that you have not changed in the slightest? Is the fruit invalid? Bassos was the most direct, glared at him, and said loudly, stop the ink, let me see the power of the barrier fruit. The others didn't speak, they all looked at Bartolomeo with curiosity in their eyes, ha 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 ha. Bartolomeo opened his arms, his face full of excitement, he laughed, and said is this the world of the strong, it is too eye-catching. Don't blink your eyes, everyone. As long as you cross your fingers, you can open the protective barrier in the Joe Kingdom. This is common sense that even little devils understand. Bartolome crossed his hands, greedily placed his fingers in the middle, and snorted. At the moment of the protective barrier, a transparent wall appeared in front of him, shining and crystal clear under the sunlight. Very beautiful, it is a perfect work of art. On the right to the transparent barrier that suddenly appeared, everyone was stunned, a little unable to recover. At this moment, Fanyoka released his sharp gun, quickly pulled the trigger, and with a bang, he moved towards Bartolome. Al fired a shot. The bullet hit the protective barrier immediately, with a crisp sound. It did not penetrate, it slipped directly, and fell to the armor. Seeing that the protective screen was completely intact, there was not even a single crack, everyone was shocked, and their faces were exposed. Surprised expression. That's awesome. Abis blinked her big eyes, a sweet smile appeared on her little face, and her voice was tender and clear, which was very nice. Karina nodded, her beautiful eyes were shining, and she said with a smile, even Fanyoka's bullets can be resisted, and the defense is indeed very strong. Now the team has improved its strength. Haley ha 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 ming. Rona floated up and down in the air, giggling like a silver bell. Desire wrapped his hands in front of him, his beautiful white eyelids were covered with gratification, and he smiled sweetly and said, very good, Bartolomeo, you have become stronger. When the time comes to call Grandma, she will definitely be very happy, Xiaoju sings and touches her delicate chin. She is slim, and smiles gently. The defense is very strong. If it is developed well, it can indeed make him a strong man. At this time, Fan Oka put the gun on his shoulder, nodded slightly, and said with a blank expression, "It can't even break through bullets, so it can be seen that the defense is extremely powerful. This is a very powerful evil fruit." Bashes raised his arms high, laughed loudly, and said that a strong defense is the best. When the battle for the squad leader begins, I can let go and fight, way ha 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 ha. Luo held the demon sword and cried, and said coldly as always, "I just entered the Great Waterway, and I immediately had good luck. This is a good start." Hawkins played the cards and said in a low voice, "This indicates that the next voyage will be smooth sailing for us. It becomes stronger again, which is a good thing to celebrate." Lafitte stood his cane in front of him. A smiling gentleman said something. "The situation is thriving, and everything is getting better and better, and it is time to reach the kingdom of Alabasta, kill Crocodile, and become Chihuahai." At this moment, Nami laughed out loud, and quickly reminded everyone to pay attention. "We have to reach the highest point, and then we will start to land." Ha ha, Nuauchi looked at the white fog on both sides, and her beautiful eyes were shining. Chao Xian burst into a smile and murmured, "It's too high, we even surpassed the clouds." Makino nodded lightly and said, "Yes, it's too shocking." Suddenly, with a swoosh, the Chris jumped over the highest point, carrying countless waves and flying in the air. There were bursts of exclamations on the ship, all faces were very inviting, and there was an explosion of joy. The Chris fell on the ocean current, splashing a lot of water, and sailing down quickly like a hitchhiker. The sea breeze blew, bringing a sense of coolness and blowing away all the troubles, so that everyone couldn't help laughing and cheering one after another. Rush into the great waterway like this, la la la. Karina stood by the railing, waving her small hands, her beautiful white eyelids covered with excitement, and she shouted loudly, "Great channel, here I come." After Sweetheart, her heart was surging, she put her hands on her lips, she stood up with Yana and looked at Baccarat, her eyebrows were curved, and she smiled and said, "After going to sea for so long, we have finally ushered in the holy moment. Everyone is very happy." Woolen cloth. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, and said gently and dignifiedly, "Everything in the past was just a little trouble. From now on, it is really a new chapter, and naturally I will be very excited." Bashes waved his hand and said with high momentum, "Great Jingdao, Lao Su has finally stepped in." Way ha ha ha. Akin was carrying the two strangely shaped weapons with a very serious look, and said loudly that my bounty would exceed 500 million Baileys. Cavendish held Durandal, and Ningui said, "I want to become a great swordsman, famous for the great waterway." Fan Yiyuka folded his shoulders with his gun, and said lightly, "My goal is to become the world's #1 sharpshooter." Lafitte turned his cane and smiled, very polite. Everyone made a rhetoric, "Really, it's quite a nice nickname." Immediately afterwards, he turned his head to look at Chris and said with a big smile, "Captain, at such an exciting time, won't you make some speeches?" Crow nodded and said calmly, "There is only one chance, you really have to say a few words, just leave us a good thought." All ears. Luo was crying with the demon knife in his arms, cold as always, and responded that no one else said anything. They looked at Chris one by one without blinking. I really wanted to hear what he would say. A big man, where did he get so much emotion? After Chris finished speaking, without the slightest hesitation, he put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked directly to the training room. Looking at his majestic back, everyone couldn't help shaking their heads in unison. Quite speechless, Carmen shrugged. He smiled bitterly and said, "Come on, about this guy, what can we expect him to say? He is still so cold and ruthless, he is drunk." Karina covered her forehead, looking like she was defeated by Chris, complaining. Up. Kia gave a sweet and lovely smile and said with a smile, "Master Chris said it very well, no deterrence is the best deterrence, isn't it?" Makino patted her little head, very gentle, "You are the one who understands the most." Betty took a breath and walked directly towards the practice, saying lightly, "It's nothing to do anyway, so let's continue to practice." Continue to practice the arrogance of seeing and hearing. Desire was stimulated by Bartolomeo, and secretly decided to double his cultivation. By one, the two of them went to sea together. If you don't become stronger, you will definitely be scolded by Grandma. This is not the same face that Desire wants to see. The girls did not hesitate, chatting and laughing, walking gracefully and leaving one after another. "Li how, did you hear that?" Bashes glanced at them coldly, and said disdainfully, "A big man, where does he feel so much?" After he finished speaking, he walked directly to the side and began to practice the armed look and domineering agent with a look of admiration. Clicked nodding his head, he said with great admiration, "The captain's words are very reasonable, it is true. Instead of expressing a lot of emotions and complaining, it is better to practice hard, improve your strength, and walk to the side, waving the two weapons in his hand, and practicing hard." Chloe habitually pushed his glasses with the palm of his hand. He said lightly, "The captain is still so ruthless, and he never wants to say anything more. It seems that this important moment was wasted like this, which is a pity." Fanoka said with a serious face, "This is fate." Lafitte adjusted his top hat and said politely, "The captain at least said one sentence is enough. After all, the captain doesn't talk much, it's really rare to be able to say such a sentence." 140. Princess Weiwei was shipwrecked as soon as she appeared. 5 hours later. Chris, in the training room. "This is the Great Waterway. The climate is really changing. It's really weird." Nami stood in front of the window, looking at the blue sky and white clouds, wiping the sweat on her forehead, and muttered something in shock. "It was a heavy rain just now, but now it has become a big sun, and the climate is completely reversed. No wonder people keep saying that this is a dangerous sea area." Nuauchi nodded high, sighed, and said with a wry smile, "The weather is very hot for a while, and then it snows heavily. It feels like a whole year has passed to me in just a few hours." Erlita wielded a big iron stick, cultivated a domineering look with armament, and said with a sweet smile, "Listen to Chris, these are nothing." When entering the second half of the Great Front Road, that is, the New World, where the weather changes, it is the real fear that Meaty stroked her pale blonde hair, and raised her eyebrows and said, "Yes, Chris said that there are the sea, rough waves, lightning and thunder, extremely dangerous. So what we are encountering now is really nothing. It's all a little bit of trouble." Carmen waved his hand and refuted it quickly. Although he said that, the weather change just now was too big. "Well, I have never seen such a strange weather. It was raining a few minutes ago, and a few minutes later the sun was scorching hot." Makino nodded lightly, still so gentle and kind, with a sweet smile. "I was frightened just now. I just put on thick clothes, and the weather turned hot, and then it was raining heavily and lightning. It's incredible that everything that should be experienced throughout the year has happened in these few hours." Kia sat on the chair. The laughing guest was sweet and clear, just like the sister next door. "Very cute," said that I have written all these down, and I will not forget it. Hee hee. Desire sat on the deck to rest, brushed his red and yellow hair, and said with a slight smile, "Chris knows a lot." Before entering the Great Waterway, I already knew what was going on behind it. It was really amazing. The Queen Sweetheart held the barbell, and the sweat slipped from her pretty and dripped onto the deck. She said something casually. "As soon as the king is placed, he arrives. Chris is a strong man, it is normal to know more. Anyway, since the first day I met him, he has the ability to solve all the problems that I encountered." Betty has always waved the banner and cultivated the devil fruit, and said calmly as always, "Anyway, this guy has always been like this. Mysterious, never revealing too much." Ju crossed Erlang's legs. Yingying smiled and said, "Didn't Chris say it before, Loki is king. Talking about talking all day, that's not what the strong do, so isn't it better to talk less?" Just then, an alarm sounded from outside. Above the sea area in front, there is a man and a woman floating. Hearing the voice of the alarm officer in the sea area ahead, The girls couldn't help but look at each other. Karina shrugged her shoulders with curiosity, and said with a smile, according to my experience, everyone is here. It has some effect. Sister Baiwei Baccarat will bring good luck. Corona was floating in the air hungry, giving out a silver bell-like laughter, agreeing, yes, yes, there must be something wrong with these two people, and that woman must be very beautiful. Holly Carmen looked at Corona, blinked her beautiful eyes, and said with a smile, it's the same as what I thought, and I think so too. Anyway, every time a woman appears, no one is ugly. This has become a well-known saying. Nuauchi raised her eyebrows and said with a smile, speaking of which, this is the first group of people we meet after we enter the great channel of Lambda. Woolen cloth. I don't know if the people here are the same as the Four Seas, it should be about the same. Meaty stroked her pale blonde hair, and said elegantly and generously, then it goes without saying, it must be the same. Baccarat folded her crimson hair, the Joker was dignified and noble, and said, you continue to practice, I will go out and have a look. Those guys are very hard-hearted, if they don't stop them, maybe those two people will be killed. Ju nodded lightly, and said with curved eyebrows, Chris will definitely not go out, it's really possible that they would do such a thing if they don't care. Let's go, I'll go out with you and see how beautiful this woman is. Makino looked at them both, her beautiful eyes shining, and she said gently and generously, I'll be fine anyway, I'll go out with you guys. Bar. Kia quickly followed, and me, don't forget me. Then, all the girls stood up one after another, walking gracefully and slowly towards the outside. I haven't seen half a figure for a long time, and now there is finally someone. Wei ha ha ha. Bashes held up his double pipes and said with a big laugh, but the special mother, as soon as you meet someone, do you save him? When we are philanthropists, we think too much. Poison Q leaned on the reclining chair and said with a weird smile, you have so much control, shoot them and kill them directly. Ajin waved his fists and said in a cold voice, men can be killed, women must stay. After all, the captain is the strongest, and Bartolomeo, who can't be without a woman by his side, kept changing his screen, practiced hard, nodded and said, in my opinion, as long as it is a beautiful woman, then it belongs to the captain. Whoever wanted to grab a woman from the captain, Lao Su refused to allow Luo to carry the demon sword and cry, as always coldly, are you thinking too much, is this the kind of person the captain is? Hawkins put away the cards, a pair of the dead man said, from the looks of it, the captain is still single and has not had that kind of relationship with a woman. Cavendish glanced sideways at Hawkins, with a speechless look on his face, and said something that you can even tell, should you be so ruthless? Crow pushed his glasses and said calmly, you don't need to look at it at all, how can you have a relationship with a woman as a captain? Although there are many beauties on the ship, the captain is pure and clean and will not be controlled by women at all. This is the true hero. And Fan Yoka looked at the sea level in front of him and said expressionlessly, this woman, blue hair, dangerous and beautiful, and is a beauty. Lafitte stood his cane in front of him, smiled slightly, and said gentlemen, anyway, everyone remembers that when you meet a beautiful woman, you can put it on the boat. As for men, accept them if you have the strength. If you don't have the strength, you can kill it directly. At this moment, on the sea ahead, there is a cry for help. Help us, please help us. Bassos looked at the approaching victims, sneered, and said loudly, why, you think who you are and we won't save you, can't we? Just kidding, we are pirates, not good people. Just think about saving people. Ajin looked at the two people and said with an indifferent expression, being able to die at sea shows that his strength is just average. The woman will let her on board, and the man will kill it. Listening to these people's words, Mr. Nine and Princess Weiwei couldn't help but looked at each other. Their faces were full of fear. Mr. Nine hugged the wooden board, and said with a wry smile, we are really unlucky, the boat was overturned by the waves, and now I have met such a person. It is extremely vicious, and maybe it will really attack us later. Princess Weiwei nodded, looking helpless on the verge of being beautiful and fair. She sighed, and said something in a sweet voice. I'm better, I'm a woman, They shouldn't kill me, but you're different, they don't seem to like you. They'll probably kill you, alas. If there's no food in town, how could we? Going out to hunt, whale Rabu. It's really bad. Mr. Nine looked at her and smiled to please her. Miss Wednesday, we are partners, you must beg for me. We took the task of guessing and killing Rabu together, and we chose the shipwreck. It can be said that we have the same disease. So, they plan to attack me later. You must help me and say good things for me. Thank you. Miss Wednesday. Princess Weiwei nodded slightly, smiled, and said beautifully and generously, don't worry, if they want to do something, I will definitely help you talk. It's a big deal, we won't get on their boat, just drifting down like this. Mr. Nine, who will always find a refuge, sighed with a depressed look. The sea of people is vast, if we can't find the island, we will starve to death. At sea. So, no matter what, we have to get on this ship. Even if he knelt down and begged them. At this moment, Fanoka looked at Lafitte, tapped his shoulder with a gun, and said solemnly, would you like to kill the man and let the woman get on the boat? Poison Q coughed and smiled ugly. The captain hasn't come out yet, which means that these two people are useless. Hey! Cavendish wielded Durandal, practicing swordsmanship. For ladies, you can't be so fierce, be gentle and sudden. The sound of footsteps came, and I saw Baccarat leading the girls, and walking over. It was really two people. Karina also followed. Maimyu looked at the blue-haired woman in front, and said with a smile, yes, yes, she is indeed a beauty, she can be let on board. 2.7 Perona floated around and nodded her head, and she has blue hair, which is relatively rare. Leiju also looked at Princess Weiwei, touched her white chin, smiled and said, you are so beautiful at such a young age. If it were a few years later, wouldn't she be a beautiful beauty? Baccarat folded her crimson hair, and smiled sweetly, it's really beautiful, and it will definitely make Mr. Nine and Princess Weiwei fascinated in the future. Seeing a woman on the boat, her face is full of excitement, knowing that the opportunity is finally here. That's great, women are very good at talking, now we are saved. Mr. Nine smiled and said quickly that Princess Weiwei nodded, her eyebrows were curved, and she was on the verge of falling, showing a startled look, and continued to say. Yes, I see those sisters are very gentle. As long as we shout to them, they will definitely help. Save us, please, ladies and gentlemen, please save us, please.